Welcome to Raging Bullets, a DC Comics fan podcast, episode 60. Welcome to Raging Bullets. I am Sean Whalen, Dr. Nords on the CGS forums, and I'm joined, as always, by my co-host Jim. Gee, Superman and Nightwing patrolling. Can't get any safer than that. Yes, I am the sensei of the whatnot, and the guard patrolling the park who couldn't resist the geek-out moment of getting his picture taken with Superman and asking Nightwing to hold the camera, Segulin.
How's it going, eh?
Wait, and in fairness, if it really was one of the two of us, I would have done more. I would have gotten pictures with Superman, picture with Superman and Nightwing, pictures with just Nightwing.
Yeah, I know. Oh, there would have been multiple different variations.
Nightwing, pull out your sticks and pretend you're hitting me with them. And the guard was incredibly subdued. I really am enjoying Nightwing, though, so we're going to be talking about that. I actually have a Speeding Bullets segment on this episode. You and I haven't had time to do those in a while, and I really want to geek out and talk about Nightwing right now by Peter Tomasi, so we'll talk about that during our Speeding Bullets segment. Before we jump into the show, Jim, I want to talk about the Heroes for the Holiday Drive. We are continuing to support Hero. If you have not had a chance to donate to the Hero Initiative, this is an opportunity for us to give something back to the creators who've given us so much throughout basically our reading lives. Whether or not you've read classic comics, or you are a new fan who's just getting started in comics today, the creators that we are reading today were influenced by these creators. So this is an opportunity for us to give something back to the industry, just for the cost of a comic, a couple bucks here or there. If you have an opportunity, we have a link on our website, a PayPal link that'll send you right to Hero, where you can donate to them. You're not giving it to us, you're giving it right to Hero. So if you have an opportunity, please continue to support Hero. And I think it's great, the Hero Initiative. Any questions, go to www.heroinitiative.org or call 310-909-7809. Jim and I continue to be proud members of the Comics Podcast Network and the League of Comic Book Podcasts. I want to shout out Kryptographik. On episode 20, they had an interview that I just got a chance to listen to, because a lot of times I got to get caught up on fellow podcasts. And they did an interview with Kat and Josh, creators of the Utopians. And they do these great little walkthroughs with them, and it's like director's commentary type of thing, and I really, really enjoy when they do this. So if you haven't had a chance, Kryptographik's a show. It's a dark horror, sci-fi, fantasy, that kind of focus throughout the media, not just in comics. But it's a great podcast for that. I love Damien, Lobo. These guys are doing great. I got to meet Lobo at the CGS 300 episode. Such a nice guy. And Damien, you know from our show. So definitely check out Kryptographik. We also have, Jim, one of our listeners who's creating a podcast. It's called Eye of the Storm. It's a Wildstorm Earth 50 podcast. So he's done a promo and a very short 15-minute first episode, and it's at eyeofthestormpodcast.blogspot.com. And his name's Frankie, and it's
cool.
I think it's great, because there's certainly a lot of interest in Wildstorm, and I could see right away, Neil Gray jumping over and listening to this podcast. Yeah. He was concerned, though, that it would be a little rough and all that, and I'm going to tell him, go right back and listen to our first episode if you want to hear rough. All podcasts are rough at first.
You got to get the groove. You got to get your own voice and just, get your flow down. Once you get that, you know who you are, and this is who you are, and you just, bam, you throw it out there.
But I think with people, when they're interested enough in the content, they can recognize the fact that, okay, this is a podcast, this is just starting, but it's the content that's drawing them in anyway, so you give a little amount of leeway for that, because it's free content that you're getting on the net. So I would definitely, if you listen to this particular podcast, or any podcast that's new in general, I would encourage people to just keep in mind, they're getting started. Jim and I are still incredibly rough at this stage. Yeah. We goof up, we make flubs, we do all that, and I mean, we've done over 100 episodes, so, that's just, it's the nature of the beast. These are all things that we all do as hobbies. We all usually have full-time jobs or something else, or going to school, or, depending on what the podcaster's doing at that point in time. So give them a chance and check out if you're a Wildstorm fan at all, or interested in Wildstorm, and you don't actually read Wildstorm. That's a great podcast, I'm sure, to listen to get your feet wet. So, good stuff. We'll have a little promo from him at the end of the show, too. I'll play that little promo that he mentioned so people can listen to that. I want to thank all of you for supporting us with Podcast Alley, Popcorn, and iTunes reviews. Anything you do to let people know about us is tremendously helpful. And people will send me emails and PMs that there was some new site that they dropped Raging Bullets into. Thank you for doing that. I got to admit, with getting prepared for the show, and Jim, I know you can agree with me on this, I don't have time to search out for all the podcast engines that are out there. So somebody who finds a website or a blog or something where people are talking about podcasts in general or comics podcasts, and they take 2 seconds to let people know that we're out there, that is a huge help. So thank you for doing that. Not just for us, for any podcast that you listen to. I encourage you to do that because you guys, your word of mouth is what gets us new listeners and directs people who are interested in our content to our shows. So we really appreciate that. Want to remind everybody to check out RagingBullets.com. We have news on where the show is headed. Top Bullets of the Month is going to be coming back. We're going to be doing that next week on episode 61. It's going to be the top bullets from January. And Jim, you were saying we haven't gotten a whole lot of submissions on that one.
Yeah, we need to, Top Bullets is one of your guys' strong segments. Send us an email of what your top 5 titles are, and maybe a little bit of something about them. Why is this something you want to rant about? Why is this one of the top titles? Submissions go to senseiofwhatnot@gmail.com, and that way we can add in, Sean's and mine 2 cents in it, as well as our top 5 picks.
You mean theirs?
What did I say?
He said as well as our top. He said Jim and Sean's picks as well as our top 5 picks, which would mean we aren't including theirs.
You know what I mean. Come on. Cut me some slack.
It wouldn't be our show if I did that. I'm the abusive one, remember?
Oh, yeah. I keep forgetting.
Even though you set me up for things, you're always the sympathetic one. I love that. We'll talk about that when we get to the email segment. Top Bullets, really, one of the things I enjoy about Top Bullets, while I love sharing my top 5, I like it when you guys get so passionate that there's that book out there, you're like beating your head against the wall. Sean and Jim, why aren't you talking about this more? And that gets us talking about it because you put it in your top 5. So we don't have a lot of submissions right now. You got about 10 days until we start recording that episode. So really right up until the day before. So from the release of this one, go ahead.
And that address, once again, is senseiofwhatnot@gmail.com.
And I do keep those posted on the site, the listener ones. So it's a great way for you to look back and see what the listeners in the past have. So you can even go on the website right now and see the past episodes that we've done with them. There's that Top Bullets link that actually shows everything that listeners have voted on previously. So get your voice heard. We want that. Anyway, we have Funny Bullets by Squatch, Love and Capes the webcomic by Tom Zoller, which is amazing. We have bullet point reviews, columns by listeners, and Where's Whatnot Now, which we have more of those that are coming up as well. Cool. So it's great. There's actually now a Sean and Jim from Countdown Arena.
Cool.
Tell us what kind of podcast we are.
Hold on 1 second. My headphones are falling off, so I need to adjust them.
Okay. Are you comfy now?
Now I am.
All right.
We are a spoiler podcast. We go in-depth into plot lines, story twists, and whatnot of the comics we are reviewing. So if we're going over something you haven't read, you may want to come back later so you can better enjoy the show.
And as we mentioned, that we love having you guys a part of the show. So if you've got anything for the website, if you want to send in an email to get your comments heard on the show, we love having you guys a part of the show. RagingBullets@gmail.com. Please send us emails, send us audio comments, whatever you want. But I love that kind of stuff. I love getting you guys involved in the episodes, getting your voice out there. That's how we got to talk about Astro City, which is great. There are things that, I would love to be able to devote a whole episode to Astro City. The problem is time-wise, you and I just haven't had the time to prep something like that. To have a listener like Eli say, hey, I love this book. I want to rant about it. That's what we're here for. So if you want to get your voice heard and you want our listener base to hear anything you have to say about comics in general, get it out there and send it in to us. We are usually very open to pretty much any submissions that you have, so definitely get them out there. This episode, Jim and I have a Speeding Bullets segment where we talk about Nightwing, and we also begin our Raging Oscars with our first segment where we're going to be focusing on our thoughts on what was the best of best in 2007 from the DC Universe.
Holy caffeine!
Jim, let's go ahead and do a Speeding Bullets segment about Nightwing 140 and 141. Honestly, the first 2 issues are out of this series, and I can't rave enough about them. There's cameos from Batman, Robin, Alfred, Wally West, but they're more than just cameos, because cameos, a lot of times when we say that, just means like they appeared in the book, no big deal. They're integral to the story and character development, which is so what I want from Nightwing. these relationships have changed over time, too, and it was shown in the book. It was really clear that a lot of care was put into this. Bruce is different. I love the bits when Dick wants to buy up buildings for a faster mode of travel and uses his love of skydiving to set up a way to travel from place to place. But he calls up Bruce, and it's clear that Bruce is, analyzing what he's buying and goes, this is a cool idea.
Yeah.
And I loved that. It was, he actually was commenting on the strategy that Nightwing was doing. So he was analyzing it, and really he was like the proud father who was seeing his son who's kind of gone to another level. And the respect that was there because he knew he wouldn't have thought of that. You know what I mean? It was Dick was thinking a little outside of his box, but was clearly pulling from things that he knew from Bruce. I loved that.
Yeah, the one thing I kind of really digged about, with he sits there and he goes, it's kind of like you go to Dad when you want something cool to be bought, and he faxed it to him with the listing and all that stuff. But when he went to thank him, it was done in person. It wasn't a call or an email saying, hey, thanks a lot. He actually went face to face and said, hey, thanks for that. I appreciate that.
And
that was cool.
He thanked him with panache.
Well, that was another cool way of thinking. And the drawing, the art, and just the layout of that whole scene was cool.
Oh, yeah.
Because, they're driving down the road, and I actually saw Alfred in the first panel look and check his mirror and see him. And then the next thing they show Dick there. I was like, oh, that's cool. Just that little attention to detail. Stuff like that. I was like, that's nice.
If you are wondering what is so cool about Nightwing and you haven't read these issues, you got to get on board. Because the relationship with Tim, the references to the Titans, Wally and Dick discussing his time away, the references to Roy, two buds together, even the small details like Wally coming in through the wall, vibrating to keep Dick's secret ID. It was just, these are all things that, there's a huge plot that's going on outside of this. It's actually the main story. These were little small details that personalized the book. I loved every moment of that. So we're not even spoiling what the actual story was about here.
Yeah.
We're just kind of geeking out about the incidental stuff that was in there. And I mean, there's a great story going on as well. The castle base was really well handled with the JSA and John Stewart helping to build his basically his base of operations.
Yeah.
And I love that Tim referenced, so are you going to be doing the cave thing down below because there was a lower catacombs? And he's like, no, he's got a different plan. And I loved it. It was great.
And it makes more sense for Dick because of his main mode of transportation. Mm-hmm. He needs to be up high to get launched and get started. I was like, damn, that is cool.
And I love that Dick Grayson at his best makes you feel like being a superhero is fun. Like, he's took this whole love of skydiving that he has now and turned it into something that he incorporates into his night job. Mm-hmm. And I love that. He's now flying around from place to place because he's just enjoying it. And he found a way to turn that into a way that makes him more efficient and brings back that whole circus performer thing in him. And he references that multiple times. Like, this is who I am, this is what I do. And it was just, throughout the issue, I'm like, he's really having a good time.
Yeah. I tell you, that we mentioned it at the beginning of the episode with that whole Superman bit.
Oh.
Dude, man, I was putting myself in the shoes of that guard, and I absolutely loved it. I was just like, and it wasn't just the guard's reaction to them, but it was Soup's reaction back to the guard. When Soup actually tells him, we're on the same team. Dude, if you were a guard and Superman told you we're on the same team, I would have been like, ugh.
But again, too, the way that it was drawn, the way it was presented, the way that the text was, Superman wasn't just saying that. He respected this guy. Yeah. He was looking at him and he was saying, no, dude, hey. And you know why he respected him too? Superman respects those people because bullets don't bounce off of them. And he recognizes the difference between them and him. And he looks at him and says, you put on that uniform every day and you put yourself at risk. Whether you're a security guard or you're a police officer, whatever you're doing, you are putting yourself at risk. I respect that. It was like you almost felt him like ready to, just give the guy knuckles.
Yeah, I know.
Dude, give me rock. And I mean, what a cool moment that would be at your job to have Superman just give you a nod. Like, tell me that wouldn't be, like, that guy will love his job forever after that.
Oh, yeah.
And I love that. I love that moment that you can feel proud about something you do because Superman says that. And that added a reality to the whole thing just because the whole reaction between them and the Guard was so real. I would have been taking pictures with all of them, though.
Yeah, I would have definitely, hey, pictures with all three of us.
Yeah, can I put on the cape and do that?
that you'd get a, no.
Yeah, they would have found me creepy by the end of the whole thing. I no doubt at all. Because I would have taken it to that uncomfortable level where like it would have been really cool for the first few pictures, but then afterwards it'd have been like we got to get away from this guy, you know. Dick would have been Superman would have been the polite one, but Dick would have been the one to find the clever exit strategy.
And Superman goes, "Oh look, a meteor!" Flies off.
I gotta fly. But it's honestly, the Rags Morales art in this is incredible. I loved the Wolfman run, but Tomasi has kicked it up a notch. This one's been kicked to 11.
It's funny you mentioned the art. Bruce actually looked older than Dick in these issues.
That's an important distinction, too.
And Bruce doesn't look old, but he does look older.
Yeah.
And I was like, hey, wow, that's kind of cool. Because a lot of times he doesn't, and I like that.
They look like they could be brothers versus father and son.
Right.
Yeah.
There's definitely the age difference, and there's definitely that, father-son type thing.
And he didn't look like he was too old to be Batman.
No.
He looked like he was older, but not significantly.
Right.
And old enough to be his dad, and there was that nice distinction there. I agree with you. It was very cool. If you have had any interest in Nightwing as a solo character and have never tried out his book, I would say issues 140 and 141 you've got to grab. This is the top of the stack read for me now. I read 140 and I enjoyed it. By the time I'd read 141, the second issue, that was the one where Wally really got involved in it. It's funny that I loved the main story, but the parts that I'm really, really drawn to was just the parts where they really showed us who Dick is, both in and out of the costume, with his reactions to the people at the castle, because he's the curator now. As always, and I think right now he's becoming DC's cameo hog, Carter Hall. Do you notice he seems to appear in everything?
Yeah. Yeah, unfortunately. No, hold on.
I always joke around and say you're like the Waldo of our podcast, but I'm kidding about that because I did that as a joke to get the what, where's what not now going. Carter really is the Waldo of the DC universe.
He does appear a lot of different places, and you know what? It kind of made sense, with his appearance here because, it wasn't just a thrown in there. He made sense for him to be there. He was helping out the JSA build, work on Dick's. I don't know what he's going to call it. His Fortress of Solitude, his version of the the Nightwing Tower. I don't know what it's gonna. It's got to come up with a name.
Carter Hall was here.
Yeah.
In my own twist, see, I wasn't making that as a negative. To me, more Carter Hall is always a good thing.
Oh no!
In my opinion, the universe should revolve around him. I'm surprised it doesn't. It's starting to, though. That mini that's coming out.
Yes.
Starlin Pen Mini.
Yeah.
That's going to have, it looks like Adam Strange, that whole cosmic, it's a follow-up, I guess, to Ranthanagar. But Carter Hall was featured as one of the names, Hawkman. I'm really excited to see Jim Starlin with him, because Jim Starlin, to me, is just batting 1,000. Death of the New Gods is another one I can't rant and rave about enough. I will be in a little bit. But Death of the New Gods, to me, is just an amazing read. If you have not taken the opportunity to check out that book, do yourself a favor. But, yeah, when I heard that he's going to be the upcoming mini that's going to involve Hawkman and it's going to be set in the Cosmic Verse and all that, you can't give me a better creator. So I'm excited as can be. And Trinity, the new weekly, has been announced. It's Mark Bagley and Kurt Busiek on that one. I don't know how we're going to handle that one on the show, Jim. I mean, we're going to obviously talk about it. I don't know if we're going to do just like a monthly segment that we do it more Speeding Bullets style and chat about it, or if we're going to do it with the depth that we do with Countdown. Part of the reason why we followed up Countdown and have been doing it the same way, we weren't really going to do it the same way we did 52, but the amount of controversy in Countdown made it kind of necessary to talk about it, because I've seen so much negativity about it all over the place, and it really wasn't our experience with the book. So I felt that it was kind of necessary for us to be kind of a different voice, maybe for people who are enjoying it like we are.
Plus, I also like the fact that Countdown is building to Final Crisis, and that's why I thought we should go in depth. I'm leaning,
it's a 52-week story,
right?
So that's something that I think that's an interesting distinction between it and like a regular monthly series. It's a 52-week story that's meant to be told over 52 weeks. So it's a different kind of storytelling. Trinity is going to be a little bit different in the sense that it's going to take place, it's going to be, a 52-week story, but it's really going to be focusing on the Trinity and their reaction to the universe. I don't know. I think listener comments and just the overall buzz on the net and all that's going to drive how we cover that.
Yeah.
We're going to cover it. I just don't know, because there's so much stuff that's going to be going on. Final Crisis is going to be kicking off at the same time, and we're going to have a lot to cover. And Final Crisis, obviously, we're going to cover issue by issue.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah,
we have to.
Yeah, that's a huge event, so that's a for sure. So Trinity, I don't know how we're going to cover it. I just haven't decided
how yet. We haven't figured out how. It will be done.
Yeah, just I'm not quite sure how we're going to do it, because we're struggling to stay caught up with Countdown. Jim, this episode we're going to go into our first segment covering our Raging Oscars. And we're going to be doing this over 3 or 4 segments. It depends on how this breaks down, because we have some listener content that we're going to put on. And that, honestly, just Jim and I were looking at the sheer amount of stuff we have ourselves. I have a funny feeling the listeners' DC universe is going to be on next episode, just because of the sheer amount of stuff you and I have note-wise for our own.
Yeah, I think so.
So we're going to be continuing this. Jim and I are going to be covering our thoughts on what was the best of the best for 2007 for the DC universe, the Wildstorm universe, Vertigo, and then the stuff outside of those universes that we want to note. There's obviously we can't cover everything, but we're trying to really be as comprehensive as possible on these awards. So we're seeing as we've been promising this for so long, and we got kind of delayed because we were going to do this way back in September, but then things got kind of derailed on that. So we actually reworked all of our notes, which was a daunting task.
Yes. Yes, and it is funny. When I first started doing this, I had this giant mathematical equation type thing that I was using, and it just got so complicated and so discombobulated that I literally did not know what I was looking at anymore, because I had little notes and little ticks and ties, and it was just absolutely ridiculous. I had stuff like where I was trying to weighted average, especially like the writers and the artists, looking at the number of titles they're working on, so that person who worked on 6 titles would have the same weight as someone who only worked on 1 title, and then, wow factor and this factor, and how many times did I talk about it on the show? How many times did I say, wow, this is neat, and it got so confusing, I had to throw that whole thing out, and I just, went with what I went with.
Yeah, I got my own little disclaimer, too. My list is completely on emotional gut responses. Mm-hmm. I went back through so many titles from the previous year. I went off personal hell yeah moments. I didn't go on what was most popular. I went on what I honestly felt. And I'm putting that there because people can feel free to agree or disagree with anything on my list. I encourage you all, as a response to this, on this episode, go ahead back and give us your own personal top lists. Because, rather than going on the negative, if you disagree with something I'm saying, say, what would you put there? And tell us. Because I think this should be an open dialogue and a discussion there. I'm not going to change my mind. I spent way too much time making this list.
Oh, God, yes.
So basically nothing you can say is going to convince me I'm wrong. But that's just it. This is my personal list, and that's the whole point of the Raging Oscars. This is my chance to say thank you for these particular books. This was so hard to do, though, because I'm being very honest on this show, and you are too, with the books that you're enjoying. My bottom of the stack is a book that I think is good that I may read again, I may not. It's a good book. And that's about, that's my bottom of the stack right now. So I've got a lot of titles to look through when I'm trying to find my best of the best. That's been my experience my entire life with comics. I don't read sucky books. I just don't have that experience. I love comics. So, I guess I'm the voice of the people who are kind of in that boat where I'm at. I've been that way my whole life. It's why I've read comics my whole life. It's kind of who I am. So I didn't realize when David Wallace came up with this idea and that we were going to do this, how hard it would be to pin this stuff down. This was not easy.
Dude, this was not, no, this was painful, to be honest with you. I was just like, pulling teeth just to say, boom, this is it. And I have a confession to make. Mm-hmm. I have one of the categories that I have two. I could not limit. And when we get to it, you'll actually see why I went with these two.
Okay, and that's fine. I mean, but
I have one category. Yeah. Every other category, I'm good to go.
Yeah, I had one category that I split up for a certain reason, and I'll explain that when I get there. It was actually, I'll say it right now. It's best ongoing title. I did the best solo book and the best team book, and it just, to me, I really wanted to distinguish between that because I feel that DC has a wonderful team book lineup, and I believe that they have a wonderful solo book lineup, and I wanted to distinguish my favorite between the two, but that was kind of where I was at. Is that the one you're talking about? Or?
No, I have another one, too, okay. But I did that as well, and there's a couple other stuff.
Because I cued you that I was going to do that.
And I was already thinking those lines, and when I heard you did, I'm like, cool. Because this was like a tough one.
Yeah, but this was really, it would be so much easier if I thought a whole bunch of books were sucky.
Yeah.
Because it really, I found myself when I was making lists, I went in every single category that I went through here. I had changed my mind multiple times, and I had to go back and read and reread and relook through books. Sometimes I would skim, other times I would go through and read whole issues. It just really was one of those things. I'm like, I want this. It's something that I want to take seriously. I want to deliver that. That way, when people are done, whether they agree or disagree with me or not, they know that these are well thought out opinions, and they can kind of go on their own and just say, okay, this is what I would have put in there. And I encourage you to do that. Go ahead and, any of the categories you disagree with me on, rather than worrying about like tearing apart why you didn't like what I put there, emotionally tell us what you would have put there. Say, this is the book that really should, this is a book that I would put in there for myself. And I'm hoping out of this that the forum thread for episode 60 just has a whole bunch of lists of great books that people are enjoying and why. And that's the way it should be. And somebody who comes in and says, what can I read in DC? Point them to the episode 60 thread and say, hey, here's a whole bunch of stuff that people are enjoying, and here's why. And I think that why will help people to be able to pick out books that they want to jump on board, or maybe trades that they should grab from 2007 that contain those great stories. Because there was a lot to like in 2007.
Yes.
It was funny. Jim and I were just laughing about what order we need to go in on this one because of how we put our notes together. We actually referenced things that we had said previously. So I was saying, should we build up from the bottom category and work our way up? And we can't really do that because our notes are designated in such a way. So, actually, do you want to go ahead with your best ongoing title? Just go. You want to do your solo book?
Yeah, I'll do my solo first because I did the exact same thing with the solo and team. For me, I had three main standouts that I'm going to talk about, then say which one is actually my Oscar. Mm-hmm. The three main standouts are Robin, All New Adam, and Blue Beetle. Now, Blue Beetle is one of the title that when I first read it, I didn't latch to it, but we got some great feedback from listeners. I was like, hey, I'm going to give this a second read-through. And sure enough, when I gave it that second read-through, I was like, oh, wow, this is a fun book. I'm reading this, and I'm getting into Jaime and just who he is. And especially some of the later developments that happened end of 2007 and 2008, I was really like, wow, this is a neat guy. Now, some of my most wow moments did come 2008 to the end of 2007, so that's probably why he's not getting the Oscar, but look for him in 2008 in the running because there is just some neat stuff happening with Blue Beetle that I'm gushing about, and I can't wait till we actually have a time when we can sit down and talk about Blue Beetle because it's a fun read.
Yeah, I agree. That is one of those books. You're right, especially the end of 2007 into 2008.
Yeah,
it's a book to watch. So this is a great time for anyone out there who wants to jump on it. The last couple issues are great reads. Pick them up.
Next, I have the All New Adam. I love the character Ryan Choi, and just his portrayal of the Atom has just been something that I'm just like, and I'm gushing, and I want to so much to say he is my Oscar. But here's the thing I noticed. Mm-hmm. Sometimes when it's anyone other than Gail Simone writing the Atom, I'm not as excited about him. I like the character, I like the story, and I like what I'm reading, but I'm not going, I'm not giggly like a schoolgirl.
So the Roger Stern issue...
It was good.
Really?
It was good. Okay. I'm not going to say it wasn't good. It was, and just like when he's in Countdown. I like him in Countdown, but I wasn't as giggly. And it's, for me, it kind of seems more like I like the writer than the character in the title. Yeah. Now, the interesting thing, here's where I'm at crossroads, because she wrote almost all of 2007. I could very easily say, bam, All New Adam is my favorite solo title.
Okay.
Without even having any remorse
and
or
I'm not.
regret.
Don't get me wrong. I'm not disputing you right now.
Right.
I was just curious at the distinction. Like, I agree with you on Countdown. What you're saying, like the Countdown feel for Ryan was slightly different. The Roger Stern issue, I really liked. I really liked that one. And I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm just saying you're right to have your own opinion. So it's not like me saying, Jim, you're wrong. I don't mean it that way. It's just my experience was a little different with that particular issue. But
yeah,
I mean. That's fine. I mean, I'm just curious. Okay, go ahead.
So the reason I went, though, with Robin is because I have seen multiple writers and multiple art teams of Robin in this year, and I've still enjoyed the title. I still have that same, oh, this is cool, this is Tim Drake, this is Robin, this is outstanding. So, and I'm also wearing my Robin shirt, but...
Was that foreshadowing?
Actually, I purposely selected this, for that reason. But...
You dress the part.
Yes, I dress the part. Well, these are the Oscars. You got to dress up for them, man.
You do.
But... Okay. This is just, for me, he has been, that really cool character. And I have gushed about him many, many times. I've gushed about the art, writing, and whatnot. Robin is really groovy, and I don't know how many more times I can talk about him without just being regurgitating like an idiot.
No, I know that's one of the things I love about when you talk about Robin, is just your sheer passion for the character, and just how much that character's come to mean for you, because that's what comics are to me. So I geek out when. I mean, even though we're not in the same... I love Robin as a title. I've always loved Tim Drake as a character. Basically since he was introduced in Lonely Place of Dying, he's just a fantastic character. But the way you've latched onto this character, and you get my emotional ties to Batman. You get my emotional ties to Hawkman because of your emotional tie to Robin. Because Batman is really where you're at with Robin. Batman's been my long character that I've had in that role. Hawkman, is just... Right. Something sick happens to me with Hawkman. I am that way with him now, though. I love Carter Hall. And he's really, just out of nowhere, that character's become that way for me. But my solo title, I'm going to go through some honorable mentions of books that just I didn't put in this category. Booster Gold is a book that I want to give an honorable mention to. Since that book has kicked off, every issue, I love time travel stories. I mentioned Doctor Who on here many times. So anytime you got a character who's jumping through time and taking a look at events throughout a multiverse like this, you've got me. And this book is just really good looking. It's a lot of fun. It's got great stories. You never know where it's going to go next. And I like that. And I like the fact that they touch on the morality of time travel and the morality of changing time and what it can do. That's stuff that I've always enjoyed in Doctor Who. So for me, Booster Gold is just a wonderful, wonderful, well-written title that actually takes things to that geek-out level where they're asking the questions that fans would be asking in the comic shop after reading the story. And I love that. It's the little tiny questions that they throw out there that, make you think. It's cool. Action Comics. This year, Action Comics, it got off track for a little while with the art issues with Last Son. But then it got back on track with the Bizarro storyline, straight on through to this Legion of the Superheroes storyline, which I think has been stellar. It was a book that was very hard for me not to put up there. Batman is, there's a Superman person, there's a Batman person. I'm more the Batman person. As a kid, when I had a budget, if I'm cutting between Superman and Batman, I'm cutting Superman. All right? I would have a very hard time cutting Action Comics right now. I'm liking it that much. I think it's a great book. It's a book that, in spite of those little delays that they were, actually hefty delay, we haven't seen the end of the Last Son storyline. It was a book, though, it's so good that when they got back on track with it, it just kind of like, it was great because they gave us a few bi-weekly issues in there, which were not Jeff Johns, but the stuff that was Jeff Johns when he got back on board, and that Bizarro storyline straight on through, I've really, really enjoyed. Gary Frank being on that book right now, I'm a big Gary Frank fan. Whether you like him or not, that's your own personal preference. I like Gary Frank, always have. His stuff outside of DC as well as DC. I think he's a great artist on this book. I'm enjoying the heck out of Action Comics right now. Go ahead.
You know what? It's funny because Superman and even Batman for me is a title that I don't always throw out praise for him, but I gotta agree with you on the action. That has been some really good stuff going on, and it's it's one of those things where you're starting to see kind of like a shot in the arm to Big Blue. We're seeing a shot in the arm to Wonder Woman. We're seeing some Batman stuff with the return of Ra's al Ghul. We're seeing the Trinity starting to flex some muscle again. And 2008 is something we're going to really see. I think more of a stronger Trinity, which I think is something we definitely need.
Another book I want to give an honorable mention to. It's funny you should say that. Batman. I've been praising The Detective by Dini, because it's been great to see Paul Dini working on it. It's a great book, and I'm not knocking that at all, but I'm talking about the main Batman title right now. Since Tony Daniels come on that book, it's been like a shot to the arm that book's needed. I really like his art on it. It has a lot of energy. They read like really great Batman stories. I'm loving this revamped Batman post-52. Just the whole character, the way he's a little bit more accessible, but he's still Batman, and you can tell he every so often slips into that mode again. They haven't totally thrown that out the window, which I would have been disappointed if they did. But I like the fact that his players around him will call him on it, and it's cool to see that, that kind of contrast and that kind of trend. When events get dark, he gets dark. When there's opportunities for him to be lighter, he is, and it makes him a character that I'm latching onto again in a way that I haven't in a long, long time. I love Batman. Batman's been one of my favorite characters. When you hear me do an angry rant about a character like I did in All-Star Batman and Robin, it's another book that I'm saying, never said that was a sucky book, but the particular portrayal of Batman in there got me angry. This is the reason why, because I want this kind of attachment to Batman. So it's a personal preference, an experience, and that type of thing. This Batman right now that's coming out in that book, I like the way he's written, I like the way he's drawn. It still didn't make my my number one because I've got, there's so much going on this year. Brave and the Bold, probably for the same reasons I said with Booster Gold. You don't know what characters are going to appear from month to month and what that storytelling is going to mean. Wade does his homework, where these characters are brought in and things are addressed, like even when Flash came in and had that great crossover with the Doom Patrol. It was so neat to see the contrast of the Flash in there. The book always looks great. The work that's going on over there with George Perez and Bob Wyachek. I mean, it's really just a great looking book. And Wonder Woman. Wonder Woman was another title. I'm going to say if Gail Simone had more issues in 2007, things would have been very different because I am adoring that book. Another character that if you had asked me previously between Superman, Batman, and Wonder Woman, let's look at the Trinity in general, I would have dropped Superman and Wonder Woman and kept a Batman book. I would have a very hard time right now deciding which one of those characters to drop because of the quality coming out right there. And I got to say, right now, Wonder Woman edges them all out. I'm loving the attention to Greek mythology that's going in there and just the whole warrior aspect of that book. It looks great. It reads great. There's some humor in there. It never goes too far. We gushed about this book. I actually had this as my number one title, and I flip-flopped multiple times. I read issues, and I said to myself, a lot of the point you made about 2007, it's like 2008, this is my book that I'm right now starting on 2008 looking at saying, this may be my book at the end of 2008 for Raging Oscars. I'm going to wait and see because there's a whole bunch of stuff I'm really interested in 2008. But right now it's starting out in the gate and really making some noise for me. Basically,
I considered the Gail Simone Wonder Woman's to be 2008. I didn't include them in there, but some of the later categories, there's parts where I first threw her name in, I'm like, no, I'm going to say she's 2008. No.
Because there were two issues, and I looked, and I'm like sitting here, I'm like, and that was really the only thing that tipped the scale on that book not being my number one was the fact that we only had the 2 issues in that year. So I'm with you. I was more thinking on the end of that. So, I mean, it really was. That kept that from being my number one book, and that was the only thing.
The thing that got me was the cover date was showing 2008, even though it was released in 2007.
See, and I didn't go off cover date.
See, I was looking cover date, and that was the final. That for me was the final determinant. I'm like, I'm gonna go cover date or release date, and that's the final reason. That's why Wonder Woman wasn't mentioned in my solos. Or I completely agree with you.
Yeah, I mean that was one of those where it was very hard for me to not do that. Yeah. So I really want to put a disclaimer on that one that I was very iffy on that. My number one title, I ranted about it all year. I liked the Roger Stern issue immensely. All New Adam. It's my MVP solo title of the year. I had a blast reading it, and I mean that is the key for me. Every issue that I read, Ryan Choi, the disembodied floating head, Happy Days references, the amazing supporting cast who each had their own little story, who each had their own flavor, including, Ryan's past and just everything I got to know about this character, I ate up. And that's just the sign of a really, really great character. Really sharp art, and the book was just plain unique. And I feel that's hard to do in today's market, and that was why it just, for me, was an easy standout. Create a character and a title that stands out in the market with so much product to choose from. Amidst all the events, crossovers, etc., I picked it up right away at every release, and I did not hesitate. It was like, oh, Ryan, more Ryan, and it was just great for me. And it's one of those books where I'm like, I don't care if it's the most popular choice or not. I loved this book. And I want to rant about that. And that's why I encourage people to do. If you agree or disagree with me, I don't care. Go on the forum and tell, what book would you put there? Tell us why. And that's great. Put it there. I want to see that out of this. It's not about right or wrong on this one. It's about personal preference, and I want to see those on the forum out of this. But this one, for me, there's no accident this book kept popping up in discussion after discussion for me. Mike Norton really seemed to be having a great time with the art. That came through on the pages. And that's where, emotionally, when you can feel the excitement from the creative team on a book, that they're having fun and having a good time, and you see that in the characters and in the art and the visuals. It was colorful, it was exciting, it was different. And it was a good different, and I really liked it. It was just amazing. Whether it was crossing over into something or not, it was just always trying to do a little something outside the box, and I really liked that.
Yeah.
So it was a no-brainer for me. What'd you do for team books?
Well, once again, I had 3 standouts. They are Birds of Prey, Teen Titans, and Green Lantern Corps. Now, teams like JSA and JLA should be mentioned, even though I'm not saying they're a standout, just because they were some wonderful stories, and I enjoyed them, reading them, but it's kind of weird. In a way, the teams seem almost too powerful. I'd like, an imperfection and human traits in my team books, not... now you see the imperfections and the human traits in the JSA because it is a very family environment, but it was just something about, just how powerful they are that it kept me from listing them as, the top team. It's weird, I admit it. And to be honest,
it's not. No. I mean, it's an honest reaction. I'm totally getting where you're coming from. It's just going to be interesting when my discussion kicks in. We'll
now,
see.
Birds of Prey, I had almost the exact same problem I had with the Atom, whereas it was, Gail Simone writing that really, really made me love Birds of Prey. We got the new creative team that's good. I'm still reading Birds of Prey.
We also had fill-in issues by Tony Bedard.
Right.
Now, I liked those.
And so did I. I enjoyed them, but I didn't have that same, that I had, when Gail was writing Birds of Prey.
What about the McKeever stuff?
Same thing. I enjoyed it, but it still wasn't,
Really?
that level for me. And it's because of that I'm not going with,
Are you current on McKeever run?
Oh, yeah.
Because it's
it is, and it's good. I'm enjoying it. It's a top of the stack, but it wasn't that, that giggly, schoolgirl giggly, that
Okay.
It wasn't that
I get it.
passionate response.
Yeah. I'm trying to be good. No, mainly because I honestly, I'm a firm believer on this one that whatever you feel and whatever I feel on this, these are very personal choices.
Yeah.
So I'm not. Normally, this isn't something where I think it lends to a natural debate between the two of us. I mean, I'll throw in little comments like when you make a mention on how you're feeling about a certain run about a character. I don't mind throwing in a comment here and there, but I'm not going to dispute any choices that you make. I mean, I really believe this is personal. Versus we're not doing the popular vote. We're doing our own personal thing. So please go with whatever you want to. I'm very into hearing what you got to say.
Okay, next we have Teen Titans. Now, the fact that they have Robin on the team really helps them out, for my enjoyment of it. Plus, also, this had just such a strong start for me when I got back into comics. The 1 year later storylines for Teen Titans, was just something that was really wow, this is kind of cool stuff. So I'm riding through that. And then you go into, the Titans of Tomorrow, the Titans East, and just this constant flow going through. I'm like, wow, this is a cool stuff. The one thing that got me, though, was on this one, I really liked, Robin. I really liked Kid Devil. I really liked, Ravager. I liked the individuals in the team, not the team overall.
Okay.
It was the strength of the individuals that made me really like the book. Whereas my winner, Green Lantern Corps, it is the Corps. It is the team itself that is a living and breathing entity that makes me enjoy Green Lantern Corps. Just the concept, the actual reading, the visuals, everything about Green Lantern Corps is just something I'm like, man, this is really neat. I like the police aspect, the military type aspect. I didn't put Green Lantern in my solo list because I think of him as part of the Green Lantern title. I honestly would like that title to be called, Hal Jordan and the Green Lantern Corps, where they focus on Hal, but there's still other lanterns involved. Or maybe like Green Lantern 2814 or something like that. Because for me, the strength of the Lantern Corps is more important than any single individual lantern.
Right. I guess the reason why I'm glad that book's called Green Lantern is it's Earth-based. So obviously they're focusing on like Hal and John. And you got that book anymore. I think it would diminish John Stewart if you just called it Hal Jordan and the Green Lantern Corps, because John Stewart now there is that whole buddy cop aspect.
Yeah.
Okay, no kidding. All kidding aside, that book really does focus more on Hal, but John is a big part of it as supporting cast.
And that's why I'm saying it could be like Green Lantern, Sector 2814. Just not, I want to see more of a focus on the core, and then just focus on. So
it does sound like a classic serial when you say that, though. Green Lantern 2814. Expect to see Tracy Morgan. You ever see that skit on Saturday Night Live? The one Tracy Morgan where he's, I forget the name of it right now. I'm drawing a blank.
I know what you're talking, and I'm drawing up.
Yeah, and I really don't want to think of Green Lantern that way.
Okay, so maybe the idea's not a good.
Green Lantern 2814. A DC Comics production.
Okay, so maybe that's not the good name. Maybe Green Lantern itself is a good name. Okay, but it's still the fact for me. The reason I had to go with this team is because the team itself is what makes this such a cool book.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny that you even mentioned Green Lantern as far as the solo title. It's another great solo. That was the hardest part about picking a solo book. There's so many great solo titles in DC right now. I love Green Arrow. And I mean, Green Arrow in 2007 was great. And, it was a book I didn't put in, for my solo. It wasn't because it was bad. It was great.
Yeah.
I didn't mention Robin, and I loved Robin. It's just, Nightwing is another book I really enjoyed. I even enjoyed Aquaman Sword of Atlantis, and that's another book that... when you've got this much quality, it's really hard to kind of chop through it all to get to your favorite. So that's why I went off of gut emotional responses, because that's telling. That is what is your favorite. And do you have anything else?
No, that was my favorite. So that's it.
No, I didn't know if I didn't want to cut you off and get any of your thoughts down there. My favorite team was funny that you said JSA wasn't yours because of the lack of vulnerability, when actually that's one of the things I like about JSA. You have this sharp contrast between these newer characters, such as, Damage, Our Man to a certain extent. He was on the previous team, but he still got that kind of new edge feel to it. Liberty Bell, the new Wildcat, Cyclone. In contrast to these heroes that have been around a while and been established, and how as a group they deal with those vulnerabilities together. You've got the Kingdom Come Superman comes in, and that makes Power Girl vulnerable all of a sudden because she's got to deal with an emotional loss in the Earth 2 Superman. So it's things like that I just love. It's basically, my opinion is, if you aren't reading this title, why? And it's kind of a no-brainer to me, and that's all I got to say. And take that as a slap to the face, and I don't care, because it really is a title that, if you got a title right now that you're like, if you got a stack where you're like, I've got this book on there that really blows in my mind, and you're not reading JSA, pick up an issue, and you might change your pull list. I mean,
and I do agree that it is a great and wonderful title, and every time I've read it, I have enjoyed it. Right. I don't think I cannot remember a single issue of JSA where I was like, I wish I had done this. I don't mean
it to contradict you.
No,
I was just more so when you were saying the vulnerability part. I'm like, for me, it's, and everybody has their own personal reading experience. So I'm not saying you're wrong, and you picked your choice for reasons that resonated personally with you. For me, it was funny. Those were things that the things you were saying you didn't see in it as much were things that I saw a lot, and it's just a difference in how we read the book, and that's fine. It doesn't have to be right or wrong. The art by Dale Eaglesham, Jeff Johns' writing. I adored the original series from Robinson, Goyer, and Johns. To me, it's the flagship DC team book. The handling of Starman, again, the Kingdom Come Superman, Power Girl's reaction, the whole concept of legacy heroes mixed in with classic Golden Age heroes. My biggest worry about this series when I heard about the society concept and how they would just keep expanding membership was, how is Jeff going to handle all these characters and make me get to know them and make me get to understand what he's trying to do with them? He's done that. I feel like I know these newer characters, the ones that they've focused on in this series, and that's really, really important to me. Damage, Hourman, Liberty Bell, the new Wildcat, Cyclone, each have varying amount of times in comic books. Damage certainly has been more prominently featured, probably out of all that cast, and Hourman was in the original group, but they're newer in the whole JSA scheme of things. He's managed to balance camera time with an awful lot of characters, which I was worried in this one. I liked the previous series so much, I'm like, is this going to give me that same feel? That whole Mr. America thing in the beginning was just absolutely stellar, and how that actually led into a new Mr. America, and we got to see some of these characters kind of popping up. I love the whole Kingdom Come thing, and it's great. It's really just a great book. If you haven't read this before, I would highly recommend picking up a trade to experience an arc. Because I think in order to appreciate this series, and you can kind of correct me if I'm wrong if you think your experience was different, but I think really to appreciate this series, you need to get an arc to get a feel for the flow and the storytelling and how they give camera time to characters in this book. And it's got Hawkman.
So what more can you want?
Yeah, but I mean,
I know.
It's really not as simplistic as that for me. I love the handling of Hawkman in here. I love Dale Heaglesham drawing him, but it is so much the team in this, and the society concept, and these older heroes trying to make a better example for the younger, newer heroes that to me really kind of sets things up. I think it's an outstanding book. It's a must-read title, and I think it's Jeff Johns' best work that is going on there. It's consistently his best work, and it's one that needs to be noted. So that's all I got on that one.
Okay.
Jim, best miniseries.
Oh, yeah. Now, here's the way I did this. I did it with the series ending in 2007.
I tried to do that.
That's how I did it.
Okay.
It was funny when I threw that out there and I set my mind to that, one name just popped in my head immediately, and that, of course, was Amazon's Attack.
Okay.
Okay, now that one was just for all the people who just looked at their iPod going, "What are you, nuts?"
I was kind of like surprised by that response.
No.
And I mean, I liked Amazon's Attack too, but I'm kind of like, what's
no. And I did. I enjoyed it, but that was more of a.
I did. You saw my reaction to it. I'm like, okay. I'm like, all right. I'm gonna see where you're going with this, but and I liked it. I'm with you, but okay. So,
seriously,
his real answer.
Seriously, I had an easy but unfair decision. Easy in that there was one limited series for me that just clearly stood out above all the rest, but unfair because it was a 52-issue limited series. Now, I'm, of course, talking about 52. For me, I look at that as a limited series, but how can you truly...
It's a maxi series.
How can you truly compare it to the other limited series?
Well, you can.
Because it is just so massive and there's so much time that you could do. So, yes, that would be my listed as, my Oscar for limited series would be 52.
And you know what? In fairness, though, you have to put it in that category. It's either do you determine it as an ongoing or do you determine it as a limited series. I think what ends up happening is if you put it in a maxi series and put it in its own category, then it means nothing because you're not comparing it to anything else. Because how many series? How many maxi series are going to come out? So I think you really got to either choose A or B. It's a limited series because it's finite from the get-go. Right. It's going to be finite storytelling.
Yeah, so that does get my Oscar. Now, if we look at a more traditional limited series, say like 12 issues or less, then I kind of have a little bit of a gray area, because if you look at the cover release date ending in 2007, it would be January 2007 Secret Six, because even though that did come out in 2006, so I don't know if you could say that's a 2006 or that's a 2007. However you want to say it, that would be if going by a cover date. Now,
see, I would have taken that as 2006, which I didn't even consider Secret Six.
So
in the equation.
And I actually,
and if I considered Secret Six in the equation, it would have completely changed.
Right.
That would have been the one thing to bump out my number one choice.
And so what I did was I figured out, not including that in the mix, what was my ending in 2007 limited series, and this is probably going to surprise you.
Okay.
Mysteries in Space.
Wow.
Yeah, I told you. It was funny because...
When did that end?
That ended in 2007.
Really? Okay.
I'm 99% sure. I hope.
Okay. Because I remember I mean, that was, I looked at that one, actually, but I thought it ended, well, I mean, the way you were going off it, though, either way, you're safe.
Right.
Because I thought the cover date-wise, the cover date-wise, it definitely ended in.
Yeah, see.
So you're fine with how your cover date is.
So
I'm not arguing with your choice. It's a phenomenal series. And that was one that would have been in my consideration, too.
And here's why, and it was funny, because...
Can you hold on 1 second on that one? I actually want to get... Let's find out when it ended. Yeah, no, the cover date on that one, the cover date was June 2007, which means any way you cut it, it ended in 2007. And that definitely would have been one in consideration for me. And we'll talk about mine when we get to it. You and I looked at this very differently in how we did the category, but that's okay. Go with what you did.
Now, one of the things, when we first did Mysteries in Space, I wasn't really gung ho, woohoo, excited about it. And this is actually one
Captain Comet and the Weird.
Yeah, well, I liked it, but this is one where after reading the adventures in the Adventures of Mystery, the
Challenges of the Unknown.
Thank you. The Travelers and just Adam Strange and
like stuff from Ranthanagar and stuff like that.
All these different stuff got me thinking about the space and the various different entities in the DCU. So I picked this back up again and I reread it. And after everything was done and I reread it, I really was like, wow, this is some cool stuff. And then we got the Starlin stuff come out with the Death of the New Gods. We have he's going to be doing that other, with the Hawkman and the continuation of the Ranthanagar stuff. Mm-hmm. I'm like, this has really got me excited for that stuff, and the whole
cosmic universe is cool.
This cosmic universe is really just like
and Green Lantern Corps. You were mentioning that before. Green Lantern Corps. That title, by its very nature, is very DC Universe versus Earth based.
Yeah, so that right there, I was like, you know what? It all started. My curiosity all started with this limited series, so I'm gonna throw this in there. So that's getting my Oscar.
Okay, and that's Shane Davis and Matt Banning on the art in the first half, the Captain Comet segment, and then Starlin did the art on the Weird segment. So it was good art all the way through as well. It was funny. I did look at that one as a potential choice for myself. That's why I was questioning whether or not when it was release date was. But it was funny when I was looking through it. I did it really what was released in 2007. So, and I didn't look at the series being finished then. I looked at what miniseries was exciting me the most. I didn't take Secret Six at all because I really took that as being finished in 2006. It's one of the most fun miniseries I've ever read. Anything they can do with those particular characters to put them in a monthly book or in a series of miniseries. When Gail said that we're going to see some more, at least in some variety or another, of those characters with her writing them, I geeked out because I love and adore those characters, the balance of humor and everything when they appeared in Birds of Prey. Those characters are just awesome. So I'll throw that in there right now. I didn't consider that in this equation. I did consider Mystery in Space, and there was only one thing that bumped it out, and that's Death of the New Gods. Probably for a lot of the reasons you just said. I'm geeking out over the cosmic stuff. Death of the New Gods, debuted in 2007, and I tried to stay on things that completely occurred in 2007, but I couldn't stay away from this stellar work because, forget if you're reading Countdown or not, it's an amazing drama. A society is dying before our eyes and struggling against it. Friends and lovers are lost. And we see as it continues that paranoia is being developed. Friends can't trust friends. The bits with Mr. Miracle, Orion, and Superman are just fantastic. Readers who've read the Kirby stuff should be ashamed of themselves if they didn't pick this up. Starlin fans, the same thing. But it's incredibly accessible to new readers. You didn't read any of that stuff. And I think and you can correct me if I'm wrong on that, I think it's an incredibly accessible series. Do you think so?
I considered it a 2008 because it ended in 2008. If I had, it would have bumped out. It definitely would have bumped out Mysteries for me.
And that's no knock on Mystery in Space. It's only just how good Death of the New Gods really is. So it's for something to bump out Mystery in Space for me, especially with how much I was geeking out over anthologies. I wanted so bad. Mystery in Space was actually the first one I looked up. I started rereading those issues, and I actually did reread it as part of making a decision for this, and I went and reread my Death of the New Gods issues for this. And I went back through, and I went through multiple miniseries, but it was really those two that were standouts for me. And I reread both of those, and I was just like, I can't ignore Death of the New Gods here. So totally you looked at it differently than I did. There's nothing wrong with that at all. I'm glad we have a chance to talk about both, though, because they're great miniseries to discuss, and it's really, I think it's good for people to hear that, wow, they both wound up in the cosmic world, which is interesting, because I never would have seen myself. You asked me 2 years ago that I would be voting for a cosmic story as one of my favorite miniseries. I never would have seen that coming.
And the New Gods thing, you look at my no experience to the fourth world, and just to jump into it and know who these people are and just get a passionate and just emotional response to these characters as I'm rating it is just a real sign, of that it is such a solid story.
Relationships and characters are explained in the storytelling too, which is great. It's so interesting that way. It never gets into like lecturing. It's you just learn about them along the way. The art blows me away, and I love when Starlin's at the top of his game. He's accompanied by Matt Banning, who was with Shane Davis and them in the whole mystery in space that you're talking about. So they just need to keep these people together. This is a band that you want to just follow each other. It reads and feels like epic storytelling. You don't need background knowledge, just an interest in checking out solid cosmic murder mystery stories filled with human drama. And that's what it is, a lot of human drama in this one. From the title, you know how it ends, but it's totally how you get there. It really is totally about how are we going to wind up at, who is somebody going to live from this whole thing, who and why, and it's amazing because you just know Death of New Gods. I mean, it's kind of a no-brainer where this is going, but it's so much more interesting to know that's where it's heading, but to see them fight against it and rally. I'm rallying behind these people.
And we know how it's going to end, but you're rooting for them. You're like, maybe they're going to swerve me?
Please? But how would gods face death? And it's really in very different ways for each one that are true to their personalities, and it's very cool. And you did learn who those personalities are along the way, so it's really neat. Jim, best single issue of a title or one-shot?
Now, I don't know. I think I'm going to surprise you with this.
Go ahead.
I'm going with Robin, number 156, The High Dive.
Okay.
This is the suicide issue, and I've talked about it tons of times on this show, and I still, when as soon as you said, single issue or one shot, this is the first thing that popped in my head. There was no hesitation, and I'm not even going to, there's other one shots out there, and I'm pretty sure yours is going to be around some, the Green Lantern Corps, Sinestro Corps War, and those were wonderful, but for me, this is that one shot. It had a strong emotional response. It was beautiful. There was some beautiful panels and just, you could really see Beechin did his research on suicide and suicide prevention and just what is the nature of someone who is going to take that final leap, who is going to do it, and how would you talk them down? It's not something as simple as, oh, your problems are nothing. No, Robin knew what to do. He knew how to get the kid talking. He knew how to show him that there's another option, there's another way to do it. This is a comic you could show to somebody who's not a comic book fan and show them why comic books are so awesome. I had to go with this.
I did. No, I mean that's not my.
Okay.
No. I did what you said as far as showed it to somebody who's not a comic fan. That was one of my issues in consideration, and it was very tough to not make that my number one choice. I had a feeling. It was funny when you said you were going to surprise me. I had a feeling you were going to go that route, and I respect it. I'm glad you did go with it, though, because I want to talk about it, because I was going to either way. I have that as my second choice, and I was ready to rant and rave about it. Freddie, through our discussions, I'd mentioned to him that I would love for this to be in guidance counselor offices and things like that. So he had a few extra issues that he sent me. He was kind enough to just send me, I want to say about 4 issues of it, because we had 4 buildings. So I gave it to my guidance counselor, she's not a superhero fan. She prefaced that with me, but she said that she would read it, and she did. She really liked it. She sent it over to our middle school as well as our high school. I don't know how they used them or what they did with them or anything like that, but to me that was the sincerest compliment somebody could give. She said to me after she read it, she said, I'm not a superhero fan, so she said, on that end, she said that wasn't material that would resonate with me. But what she said was, I can definitely see the value in this book for teenagers who could, latch onto these characters and kind of just start thinking. And she said it's a great story for that. And I think that's kind of the sincerest compliment you can give a story, where somebody can read it afterwards and go, Yeah, this isn't my cup of tea usually, but there is an incredible amount of value in this. That is a very important story. That is an issue that if you didn't pick it up and read it, I don't care if you like Robin or not, you should pick that up. It's goes down as one of the most important stories that I've ever read. And there's a big difference between that and then this category that we're talking about. It kind of stands on its own in its own category for that. So I would almost... I want to preface that, even though I didn't choose it for this particular category, the importance of that particular issue I was going to note regardless. So I'm glad you chose it because it gave us a chance to just talk about that, because it's just the art, the storytelling, it showed a lot of care to the particular subject matter. So it definitely deserves just a distinction as perhaps the most important story that was written in 2007. So, and I can definitely put it in that spot. So I'm glad you mentioned that. But I thought it was really cool that my guidance counselor, who's just... I'm leery to even say she's not much of a comic fan, because I think a lot of times people automatically, when they see comics, think superheroes and think, well, I'm not into superheroes, so I'm not going to like comics. Comics are so far beyond that right now, and I could get into a discussion with her on how there's going to be something in comics you'd like, but I didn't get into that discussion with her. It was really just the Robin issues at that point in time. I'll try to break down that wall some other time with her. My guidance counselor is a very open-minded person, though, and that's why I really wanted to give those issues to her. And to be able to talk about that comic, because we talked in depth about the content in the stories, it was really interesting to have that discussion with somebody who's not a superhero fan, who was taking the subject matter seriously. And that was cool, because she treated it like literature. And I respect her for that. Even though she said in the end that she's not a superhero fan and that's not her cup of tea because of it, she actually treated the story that was told and how it was told seriously. So I got to give a shout out to my Sally Siegler's name, my guidance counselor. She's cool as can be. And for her to even do that, I thought was just really, really cool. So we'll go on to that. My favorite one, I'm going to agree with you, it definitely was from the Green Lantern Corps. It was the Sinestro Corps War initial one-shot. And the reason, and I had another honorable mention besides the Robin story that we're talking about, the Search for Ray Palmer, the Crime Society issue with that jokester story, was another one where I teared up at the end of it. Because the reveal at the end, where and at this point in time, I'm going to spoil it because it's been so long since it's been released. The reveal at the end that the jokester's, I guess you would say girlfriend or wife or fiance or whatever she wound up being.
Girlfriend, probably. Yeah.
But I mean, he had the kid with her.
Yeah.
The fact that she was alive and he thought he'd lost everything, and she was tearing at the end that he left. So he would have had this opportunity to have a little bit of a better life if he had stayed. And then knowing the fact that he's going to die and that he died in Countdown, It was such a tragic story. And I really liked it. I liked the character from beginning to the end. It was a real geek out issue. It's definitely a one-shot, even though that Ray Palmer story, you could say it was a continuing story. Each of those issues could be read as a one-shot. That was a book that stood out for me. Jamal Aguilar on there was absolutely amazing. That gets an honorable mention as well.
You know what? And actually, I got a co-sign on that one. That really, was just a wonderful read, and yeah.
It looked great. And
look and read wonderfully. And when you have like an art and a writing that just flows nicely together, you're like, man, this is cool.
And they had an evil hawk girl.
Yeah. Well, for it to be awesomeness, there must be a hawk involved.
Right. But it was really just it was a fun issue. It looked great, and but the one I went to the initial one shot of Sinestro Corps War, and when that came out, admittedly, when you hear me talk about Green Lantern, people have got their favorite characters. Who mine are on this show. I get redundant with it, and that's fine. That's what people do when they're in love with characters. But in the particular case of Green Lantern, I've always enjoyed the Green Lantern concept. This blew me away. The second I got that issue, I called you up. I said, we've got to do something on this. So we immediately started recording an episode on that one shot. We did over Skype. You and I we threw that together just because, and if you want to hear an episode, just very honest, emotional geek outs, it just came from the fact that we really wanted to geek out about a title. That was this issue for me. The creative team remembered that this is about the Corps, which encompasses different beings from so many different planets that would react to this event. Many different heroes are in the Corps, beyond those from Earth, and I really felt that crossing over of both titles helped the prequel one-shot, because you got to kind of see right from the get-go that this is going to be big. And that was like teased in the whole thing, and it was one of those fortunate things where the one shot was so great that I was wondering afterwards, can the event live up to what was delivered in one single issue? When I met Ethan Van Sciver at the table, I never identified myself as Rip from Raging Bullets. I didn't want it to look like I was only saying nice things to him because I'm from the podcast. I walked up to him and I said, that may be the best single issue I've ever read. If not, it's one of the best. I said I would have to really sit down and be hard pressed to find out what my favorite issue of all time of any title. But I just said the flow, the art, everything. It felt great. It was a hell yeah issue. I read it so many times afterwards just because I enjoyed it so much. They just deserve kudos. The whole creative team on that one. Everything just gelled together. It was amazing. It was really amazing. Kilowog to Guy Gardner, just the amount of different types of characters that were in that book. There was somebody you could latch onto. There's somebody in there for everybody to latch onto. And that's why I think that event has had such a positive reaction from fans, is because no matter who you are, and we could probably argue who was the coolest character in that to death through all our listeners and things like that, it was really just a great opening salvo to a great particular series. So that one shot really just, to me, it was kind of a no-brainer. Adds even more weight that you've got issues like we're talking about, like that Crime Society issue. And we could go on and on about great issues that were released this year. Birds of Prey Swan Song was also another one I put down for honorable mention, because I cried almost. I was teared up at the end of Birds of Prey Swan Song. That emotionally resonated for me because I love those characters so much. It's one of those stories that really hit me. This thing was up against some heavyweights. It wasn't, when I say it was a no-brainer, I don't mean that lightly. If you're going to go into a prize fight, you don't want to go against the competition that this issue had this year. And it was just, to me, it was a great, great year. And it was a great, great issue to have come out this year.
Yeah, dude, I gotta completely agree with those. Every statement you made, I do agree with 100%. That was I read it, I put it down, and I said, wow. When you have that just whoa moment when you read a comic, you have something big. And then it just kept all the parts from the Sinestro Corps War, all those one-shots were always the same. I was like, wow, this is cool. This is neat. And yeah, that was creative team firing on all cylinders.
Mm-hmm. Who was your best male character?
Well, here's the way, when you look at the Oscars and you have the best actor and actress, they say, in comedy and drama.
Is this the one you broke down?
I kind of broke this thing down a little bit. And what I did was, for both male and female characters, I had three kind of sub ranges in them. They were character development, character usage, and overall coolness of the character, or as I also refer to as the Sean Hawkman obsession.
Who just appears everywhere.
Right. So, for me...
He is a camera hog.
He is.
I love Hawkman, but I want to talk to him now because the dude has issues.
Yep.
He just seems to appear everywhere. Like, if there's a TV camera in the DC universe, Hawkman's there.
Okay. For me, with males, character development, all new Adam, Ryan Choi wins hands down. It was just... We've gushed about him a bunch of times already on this episode. We've gushed before. He is the coolest new character to hit the scene, and close second was, of course, Blue Beetle. Mm-hmm. And I tell you, look for him, as I said, in 2008. Okay. Because, there was a lot of really neat developments, especially end of the year, beginning of 2008. Character usage. Now, I kind of consider this as used in the DCU and or their own title. And I went with Batman on this one. Mm-hmm. Now, normally I am a Superman guy. If you ask me, are you super or bats, I'll say Superman because I like dun-da-da. But...
Do you really like dun-da-da?
I like dun-da-da. And if this was a video podcast...
What does dun-da-da mean to you?
Well, it's not just that. It was the physical stuff, which we need to be a video podcast. You did, but you puff out your chest and you... Dun-da-da, dun-da-da, it's... Yeah.
Is that all you like, though? Or
I do like that about Superman, but... When it comes to Batman and his usage in the DCU...
Definitely not dun-da-da.
No. But... whenever you see him make his appearance, especially 2008 and even really recently, we're seeing this detective, we're seeing the strategist, we're seeing just, Batman. And he's not just the creepy, scary Batman. He has his moments where he's coming in and he's got the battle plan. Yeah. He's the one who's making it happen. He's a guy with no powers, but he still takes out super mega powered villains. Why? Because his strength isn't just in external powers, it's who he is. It's his training, his preparation, and I like that. And every time you see him in a title, there's going to be some moments when he freaks somebody out and he scares them. But there's also going to be moments when you're going to see that detective, and you're going to see that just that coolness that is Batman. And that's why I went with him for...
And just building off of that is things that I'm liking. When I talk about All-Star Batman and Robin and I critique certain things in it, there are elements of that book I'm really enjoying where they portray Batman. They portray his theatrics in that book very well. And I like that theatrical part of the character, talking about that's one of the ways he compensates for the fact that he's human. And that is portrayed very well in that. I love Batman. As a kid growing up, the cool thing about Batman is there's a part of you that believes you could be Batman.
Yeah.
And that is the cool thing about that character. And that as a kid, I always wanted to be Batman. My cousin will tell you that. Because she had to be either Wonder Woman or Batgirl, whether she liked it or not. And to this day, she will not let me live that down. If I had my way about it, we would still be doing that. But it's... but that, I know, I'm not well.
No, you're not, dude.
Yeah. Nobody's questioning that at this stage. There's hundreds of episodes that's like proof of that, so I'll just admit it. But that is the great thing about Batman, and that's you're either dun-da-da or you resonate with that. And for me, it is that human aspect of Batman. That's why I've always been a Batman guy. He is my all-time favorite superhero. So when you're geeking out over him right now, I'm loving this. I actually do love the fact I only picked one person, and I push myself for that because it's funny. I put pressure on myself in all these categories because I know out of the two of us, I'm the comic fan who really enjoys everything that he reads to varying degrees. Like I said, my bottom of the stack book is a good book that I'll probably not read again, but it was a good book to me. I'll not read it again, and that's probably the worst thing I can say about it in the sense that I read it once, I'm glad I read it, but done. So my experiences are, I have an enjoyable experience with comics, and that's great. I mean, there's a genuine, it's honest, it's where my experiences have always been. I'm not afraid to say something, stunk, but that's kind of who I am. So when we do these categories, I kind of push myself to show people that it's not as simple for me as everything's great and they're all on one even playing field. I can break it down to being single. I love the way you think, though, because you really put a lot of care when you choose these different categories in that it's not as simple as I couldn't decide between. It was, I'm rationalizing why these all belong there. So when you're explaining the way that you did this, I'm loving it because I'm like, these are really cool reasons why they belong in your list. So I'm really enjoying listening to your way of thinking. And I think it is kind of cool that we approached it a little differently because we both took this very seriously and are presenting it in a very personal way. So I'm sorry, I kind of went on a tangent there. But it is more so I don't want you to think that I think less of the way you present yourself because of there being more choices. I respect the way that you do it. I think it's very cool. So I'm enjoying this. So go ahead.
Okay, in my last category, the overall coolness or the Sean Hawkman obsession category, for me, it's Robin. And I don't think anyone's going to be surprised by that statement. No. Tim Drake is my Carter Hall. Robin is my Hawkman. I mean, he's my go-to guy for hero and just read and just, I like who he is, where he's come from, where he's going to. That was a no-brainer.
Cool. Very cool. You see, for best male character, I always try to put myself outside of my favorite characters because obviously great Batman moments in 2007 stood out for me, and I really enjoyed seeing when Tony Daniels came out of the main Batman book. There were issues of Detective Comics I really, really enjoyed that I thought really stood out for that character. Issues of All-Star Batman where it really started to help me understand what the team's going for, and I started to feel a little more sympathetic towards Batman, who I haven't really liked in that book, but now I'm starting to see where they're going with him, and I'm getting a little bit more attached to him, which just makes me feel good because I'm like, I've never disliked, Batman. So it wasn't ever an issue of not liking that series. I just didn't like Batman in that series, which was very weird and hard for me because I've never had that experience. But I'm starting to get him now in that title. Hawkman's various appearances, but I enjoyed his moments in JSA. All New Adam, I was going to jump for him as my best male character. But I really went for this one. I'm like, who was the character who I think in the DC universe just kind of gave me hell yeah moments where I just kind of understood him in a way I never had before, and that was Hal Jordan for me. It's kind of funny considering that, I talk about my favorite characters, and I even explained before where I'm at with Hal Jordan. I really like this guy in 2007. He wants to be a good guy, and that's who he strives to be, and he always puts that out there. He's at his best in a major crisis. It seems when things kind of slow down a bit that, Hal always doesn't handle them so well. But we see these leadership qualities emerge, and he makes us all want to be a better person during those times of a crisis. Whether core members were rallying behind him or biased against him because of his days as Parallax, we saw him step up and be the kind of hero against impossible odds that we all want him to be and to inspire. And I really liked that about him. It was really just great. This is a good year for him. Moments with Kyle where we saw him motivate him at his darkest times were also great. We saw the two connect, and, Kyle comes out respecting him. But you also saw that Hal respected Kyle. And I think for Kyle fans, they needed to see that as well, that Kyle's not just this tiny little character that is a throwaway. Kyle's important to the Green Lantern universe. And Hal demonstrated that. And Jeff Johns did a really great job with him of showing us that Kyle is just as important in Hal, in different ways, but that's the strength of the core that you talk about. But it was nice to see it through Hal. That Hal was kind of telling the readers who this guy is, and that he inspired Kyle to solve his own problem. He rallied Kyle. I love that. And that to me is a good leader. Hal's definitely a top-tier hero, and, the Outstanding Sinestro Corps War told us why. So it was really... In 2007, that was the hero for me that I'm just kind of like, wow, what a standout hero in 2007. Whenever he appeared, he just seemed to be the man of action. And but I like his human qualities that, like, when things kind of slow down a bit, things get a little goofy for Hal's world. And I like that about him. I really, Hal's an everyman. And I'm starting to really understand Hal in this new series in a way that I never did. And I like him. I'm really liking him a lot.
And his character in Brave and the Bold.
Yeah.
The way he wasn't very, you see him just hanging out with Bruce at the casino, and he just throws caution and went, let's just go for it. And sure enough, bam, bam, bam. Next thing you know, he's got a stack of money. I can see what you're saying. Yeah,
he's Hal.
Yeah.
So he's a great character when he appears in books and when he's utilized properly. So I really enjoyed Hal in 2007. So he was my best male character in 2007.
Okay. Female characters, I kept the same three subcategories. Okay. Because I'm not just going to play favorites to the male. Female, character development, it's Cyclone from JSA.
Okay.
She is just someone I want to see more of in the stories. I really like this innocence and kind of wide-eyed wonder that she has, towards everything. Especially like when they invited her to the team, and she could just see her just beaming and tearing up, and it's like, oh my God, yes, I want to see, just that character, and I really, really hope they don't have something horrific happen to her that takes away that innocence from her. I want her to keep that and just keep going on and who she is and just that, oh, that's neat. She's the cool hero. Right. She's that little sister that you want to protect.
And I like that Stargirl relates to her because Stargirl's been there.
Yeah.
And it's cool to see that relationship developing. Kitty Pryde in the X-Men and Ileana Rasputin had that kind of relationship. And it's nice to see it in the JSA. I mean, it was just one of those things. I remember growing up when the New Mutants title kicked off over there, and there was Uncanny X-Men running parallel, and those two were best friends. I really liked that relationship. They had Lockheed, the Dragon, and all that, and it's neat to see that in JSA. I like it too for the same reason. So I'm glad you acknowledged her. That wasn't it wasn't somebody I thought of. But I see why you put her where you did and the development of that character. I agree with you. She's cool. No, she is very cool.
Definitely. And a close second for me was Misfit from Birds of Prey. Mm-hmm. I just, the introduction of character, I'm glad she's still around and they just didn't push her aside when the changeover happened. And I like, where she's going, and she should be an interesting character we see, a couple years down the road and whatnot.
I mentioned her later, and probably for a lot of the reasons that you mentioned her as the character development category are the reasons that I mentioned her later, but it's at a different category.
Okay. Character usage for me was Black Canary. Dude, man, she is a strong female character who was just so developed wonderfully in Birds of Prey, and she now has the rightful place as the JLA chairperson. Add to that, we have this emotional dealings she's got going on between her and Green Arrow in their series. You just see just this mega wonderful female character that I was just like, wow, this is awesome.
Couldn't agree with you more. Dinah Lance, Black Canary. She went from being the girl who was like a sidekick to Green Arrow to being something far more. Birds of Prey took an incredibly interesting foundation and turned it up to 11 so that this character became a believable and essential leader to the Justice League. I love that evolution. It made her and Ollie being back together that much more interesting because both of them have grown over time, so it isn't just the same old story. It's something far more than that is far more interesting than perhaps it ever was. Which is really, really neat. I can't praise Gail Simone, Brad Meltzer, Judd Winnick, and Dwayne McDuffie for recognizing the potential of her character concept and adding another great female to the top tier of DC's heroes community. Because it could have been just Gail used her, and then, when the time came for Gail to leave Birds of Prey, she just stayed in that pattern. It was great that they recognized that this character has really been developed in Birds of Prey and is ready to move into something more. Kudos to Chuck Dixon. You got to go all the way back, and it's just a character that's just been developed over time into something far more. And it's great to see that. That needs to continue. So, when I mention the other names that have taken on the character after she left Birds of Prey, it's because keep that character moving. She needs to keep moving. She needs to be... It's great to see her in a couple of books now. It's great to see her featured in those books. I totally agree with you on her being the chairperson of the JLA. I think it's incredibly interesting that character's there. I think it's interesting for that character to be there with the dynamic of Superman, Batman, and Wonder Woman because it is natural that people, when they see Superman, they're going to go to Superman first. But then ultimately it's interesting to see him then recognize that there's times where he's got to step back and defer to her decisions. And that all of them are willing to do that. It shows the respect to her, and I really like it. It's an interesting dynamic that way. To have a Superman on that team and have that, the appropriate times, have that happen. I really, really like that. She may be sexy, but God help the villain that thinks that is all that they're dealing with. And that is a cool thing about her. Yeah. Really a cool thing about her. That, she is more than a pretty face. And it is all those layers outside of that makes her so interesting. That she is that human element. She can be a real person, but she has vulnerabilities. Really just a cool character. So when you were saying it, I'm like, yes. I'm
assuming that's your choice.
No, that is. Oh, no, wait, that was my best female character of 2007. Yeah, I'm going on a tirade because she was great. So I got to agree with you there.
Now, I do have one more category, the overall coolness. And it's interesting. This person I originally had for character usage, and I had Black Canary as my overall coolness. Okay. And I decided to switch them around just because Black Canary is just that such presence she had that I'm like, she fit better in the usage. Overall coolness goes to Barbara Gordon, Oracle. When, it's just like you look at just who Oracle is. She was a superhero who gets paralyzed, but she doesn't give up the fight. She's going to, reach out, she's going to work through her problems. She's got some limitations, physical limitations. Yes, she's in a wheelchair, but that doesn't stop her from being a hero. It doesn't stop her from fighting the fight and doing what she has to. And we even saw that she can still throw down. She's still just as tough as she was before, a little bit different fighting style, but she's still, there. And then some great issues with her in the field, where she did some field work. Barbara Gordon is a cool female character, and that's why she gets my overall coolness.
Cool. I couldn't agree with your statement more on that. Who'd you have for best writer?
Well, that's really going to be a surprise to a lot of people, considering I have two previous categories where I said I'd pick this title, but I really only like the writer over the actual title. So, big surprise who I'm going to pick.
Okay.
Gail Simone, come on. the combination humor, action, personal character development, just that realistic response of the characters that we're reading have just made it a joy to read anything she writes. I mentioned, before that, just, I like, how Beechin has done some research, with the suicide issue and with other stuff. Well, that same type of research level, you see it in Gail Simone's writing. We talked about it just earlier with the Wonder Woman, with just these references to the Greek mythology. And when we had her on the show, we talked to her just like how she got the flow down with some of the combat and the fighting stuff, and just you can see she does her homework, she knows what she's talking about, but it's not just rigament, bam 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 structured. It's a nice beautiful flow through that. As I'm reading it, I could see the images in my head, and then I look at the comic and I have the images in front of me, and then bam, you can just, it's this a really just passionate emotional response when I read her stuff. Old stuff, new stuff, you name it. I have that same happy feeling when I read, her stuff. It's, I think, really no brainer. There were some other, some other people that, gets honorable mention in my case, Jeff Johns, Adam Beechin, both great writers. I like how Johns uses action, but he also has those references to the past and previous iterations, but just also events that happen a little bit, come back later, the flow through. Beechin, as I said, a lot of research. He is, for me, he is, I'd say, probably the Robin characterization that I have in my head is Adam Beechin's Robin. So those are very strong writers.
That would be the 1 year later one that you just
got. And same thing with the 1 year later Teen Titans. That's Jeff Johns writing, and I was just like, that was the things that drew me in and said, wow, this is awesome. But top shot has to go to Gail.
Now, it was funny when I approached this. I said to myself, okay, I want to put outside my emotional feelings as far as who's my favorite writer in general, and who did I feel was the best writer in 2007? Who had the best year in 2007 as far as writing. So I had a tough time with this. I really did some research on this because I didn't want to make it as simple. And I'm not saying, I don't mean that anyway as a commentary on how you came to your decision, because I know you put as much into this as I did. I just kind of want to go through my own experience and how I approached it. There's a ton of great writing talent at DC at the moment. I love Gray and Palmiotti. Anything they do, their issues on Countdown stand out for me. The miniseries they do, the stuff they're doing on Jonah Hex. It's just, anytime I see them on something, they excite me. They're just a great team. They bat 1,000. The stuff being done on Checkmate is just fantastic. That's just a great book. The writing team on there is fantastic. Winnick has been top-notch. Morrison, Wade, McKeever, Beechin, like you said. Lots of people just batting very, very high for me at DC, and I'm just, going over a quick list. I broke it down to Jeff Johns and Gail Simone. So I'm sure this isn't a huge shock, but the important part for me is really to share here how difficult that decision was. Because Jeff had an amazing year with Booster Gold, Action Comics, JSA, Green Lantern. Basically anything he touches becomes an instant classic because he cares about the characters, cares about them as heroes. He pulls in the small details that makes fans geek out, which makes it very hard for me not to choose him. Being honest, though, his name went on my list multiple times as I read books and flip-flopped on my decision. The amount of background rereading I did to come to a final decision on this was crazy, because this was the hardest category for me. Because I really didn't want to make it... I wanted this to be an important category, because I really do feel the writing talent at DC is just that good, that I really wanted to take a look at just the people who I'm really enjoying. I read stuff by Gray and Palmiotti. I went back through and I read Beechin's stuff. I read through McKeever's stuff since he's been there. I went through Winnick's stuff, Johns, and it really, it came down to quickly to Jeff Johns and Morrison. I love Morrison. I came down quickly to Jeff Johns and Gail Simone. Read a lot of Jeff Johns stuff. So many hell yeah moments in that particular. I mean, it was fun researching this, but it was very hard to cut this down. Gail's my choice, though. Birds of Prey. What can I say? Her run ended on such a high note. These characters have felt like and are like visiting friends. I will follow stories about Black Canary from here on out because Gail made me love her. I grew up with Barbara Gordon on the 60s Batman show, the Filmation cartoons with her as Batgirl, the classic comics. I loved this character before Killing Joke, and to show what a great concept that was, Oracle has eclipsed her days as Batgirl. She is a hero that because in spite of her being stuck in a wheelchair, she reminds us never to judge a book by a cover. She has a mind. She uses it to build a new life and somehow becomes even more important. I love the nod that Lady Blackhawk plays to DC's past. She's the character you want to have a beer with, but want to watch your words because you know if you insult her or insult a friend of hers that she's going to whap you in the jaw.
She'll throw down with you.
Yeah, yet she has this soft side about her that comes through too, so she's another one. It's not a cookie-cutter character, and she's a lot of fun. She's very cool. Huntress was a favorite of mine from the old Earth 2 days when she was Batman's daughter. They revamped this character, and Helena's revamped storyline really started to grab me with her miniseries with The Question and the one with Nightwing that included issues in his own book. And Gale built her off the JLA appearance and turned her into someone who could fill a role left by Dinah joining the JLA. This is important because I love the Birds of Prey concept, and it needed to continue. What else can I say about Misfit? But, she starts off as comic relief, but you know that her journey, and we're seeing that, is going into something more, one that you'll want to follow. She's a wild card in any situation. Great introduction of a character that Gale developed because I want to follow her. I want to see where she's going. So she's cool. All New Adam speaks for itself. I made that my top solo title. It's just that solo character with his interactions with that supporting cast, which is amazing. The humor that it could go too far, but it doesn't. It's like reined in just right. It was a fun and unique and fresh book. I geeked out about that before. I'm just going to get redundant if I keep going on about it. But every good solo title should have in it elements that you can see in All New Adam. Wonder Woman is just plain exciting these days. When Gale took over, the art seemed a little more interesting because the whole creative team, and I can say this about All New Adam too, the whole creative team felt the special vibe going on. I mean, we devoted a whole segment to kick off this title and explain why this book is rightfully a top-of-the-stack book right now. There is an excitement in Wonder Woman that makes me hope for a good long run. That, without a doubt, right now is my current top-of-the-stack read, Wonder Woman. Those first 2 issues kicked off. It was very hard for me not to name that my solo title. That's why I'm definitely saying that 2 issues in, that was the only reason why. And that's it was by a slim margin right there. You mentioned Secret Six before. I didn't count that in 2007, so the reasons that I mentioned are the reasons why I chose her. But that is another great book that ended in 2007 that kudos. Just a great book. She's somebody who I really wanted to make sure. I'm like, do I really want to say this for 2007? Is this really what I want to say? So I feel it's the most sincere compliment I can give that she was up against a powerhouse in Jeff Johns. Oh my gosh, did he have a great year? So for me, it's going to be any of these comments that we have on here are going to be issues of personal preference for everybody. But I feel very comfortable saying that 2007 was Gail Simone's year for me, and it's wow. And it wasn't a light decision.
No, dude, not at all. And it was funny when I started that whole equation and all that stuff that I was doing. It was for this topic because I didn't want it to just be an emotional response, and so then I started going through and. When I first initially did it, because of all the great work Jeff Johns was working on, he was actually kind of beating Gail Simone. And then I'm like, I'm looking at a dozen or 9 or 6 or 7 or so titles versus, only a couple. So that's when I started the whole, I have to weight this. And once I weighted it, those two were right around even level. And I'm like, okay, the math isn't working. I got to go with my gut. I got to go with what is my emotional response. And that's, what I went with. But I got to agree that there's just been some really cool stuff going on. And just there's been a lot of creative teams and writing teams just firing on all cylinders. And I'm really enjoying this stuff.
Oh, yeah. I mean, the DC writing pool is incredible.
Yeah.
It's really, they've just got such an immense amount of diverse talent that, it's why I get frustrated when people say that they have this sucky pull list and they're so mad and they're so angry. I'm like, with how many titles on there, how is that even possible? It's like you're not even trying to fix that. There's so much good work out there and it's so diverse. I just don't have that experience. I don't understand how people can. And I'm not saying that they have to agree with how I feel about a book. You really don't. Any of this that I'm saying right here, these are personal opinions. I'll defend them to my death. But because I really firmly believe them. But that's, this is my preferences. These are things I like. You don't have to like the same things. But one thing I do believe that everybody out there should try to strive for as a comic fan, and I do stand behind this as my mantra, find that perfect pull list. Because if you don't have that, if you're not geeking out at your books, or at least feeling at the end that your bottom of the stack book is a good book, you're doing something wrong.
Yeah.
Because there's too much product out there right now. And I'm not just, I don't just read DC. I read stuff outside of DC as well. I've got a lot of independents on my pull list. I'm reading a lot of Marvel stuff. Because of the show, some of that stuff gets pushed back. Where I'll wait 2 or 3 or 4 or sometimes 5 or 6 issues, not because of quality, but because I have to read certain things to stay current for the show. But, there's so much product out there in and out of superhero universes. If you're really not trying, if you're not enjoying your pull list, because it's too easy to find a great pull list at this point. So I don't get the whole. I see all this anger on the internet where people are just angry about their comics. I don't get it. Mm-hmm. Like, to me, the comic industry right now needs people out there. If you got that title, that your number one title on your stack, start telling people about it, please. Because if I was a fan who doesn't read comics and I looked on the internet for information on comics, there's a lot more negative crap out there that people are spouting than there is people who are shouting about the book that they're enjoying the most. So please, if you feel so inclined that you have to go on this big negative tirade, balance it out with a positive tirade that's equally as long on a book that you're enjoying. I'm not saying be dishonest. Go ahead and do that negative rant. If you got to do that and that's emotionally where you're at, please do that. But remember, there's got to be something else in your stack. And if there's not, you're doing something wrong. You are. Don't you agree? I mean,
dude, hold on. I agree. I'm sitting back and just enjoying this.
Yeah, because it is, and that's really what it's all about. We don't want people to sugarcoat things like that. Don't do that. I don't do that. I don't care about sugar. I don't care what people think about my opinion one way or another. That's why we do a podcast. We're out here to rant and rave, and we're being honest and goofy, and this is who we are. But this, to me, it's really emotionally important. It's the one area where I have no bend, is that if you don't have that perfect pull list, if you don't have that book that you can rant about, you're doing something wrong. Find that book and please shout it out on the net, because there's so many people that just thrive on going to forums. And I'm not talking about ours. I'm not ranting on any of our listeners. I don't mean it that way. I'm talking about just what I see across the net in general. There's so many people that live to just jump and be the first one to make a negative comment. And I very rarely see that first person to jump and say, that is the coolest thing. Get that out there. Because if I was a fan who's not reading this stuff, I don't know that I would if I looked on the net.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that, I'm hoping, is something that we as a group can change. Be honest about it. Get out there and shout about those books. Nightwing BK, every so often he'll pop something on the forum about Blue Beetle. And it's to hear him geek out about that book and to see that, it convinced you to pick up a title.
Yes.
That's what you want to do out there, and please start doing that. I'll get off my soapbox on it, but it's something that's very important to me. Whether you like what I have to say about anything or not, please take those thoughts into consideration. If there's one thing that people out of 100+ episodes of this show that I want them to take me seriously on, it's that particular comment, because it means a lot to me. I do believe that this industry needs more notice, more positive notice about people who are really enjoying their comics. I don't sugarcoat a single thing I say. You don't have to agree with me, but please find those things that you can rant about positively, because there are those titles in your stack, and if they're not, find them. Go ahead, Jim.
All right.
Best artist.
Best artist. This was another very tough one for me, because I am still heavily writer-focused. And I do look at the writers more than the art, but it's something over this past year I've tried to develop. And as I was going through, just thinking of the different artwork, the different stuff I've read, something did come to my mind, and I have multiple things, by the way, but something came to my mind that there was an artist out there who got me to buy a hardcover trade of a series that I did not enjoy, that I didn't even remotely like reading, but I picked up that hardcover just so I can enjoy their artwork. I'm, of course, talking about Jim Lee and the All-Star Batman and Robin. I rave how much I disliked the All-Star, but I picked up that trade so I could enjoy just that art.
Good for you.
Now, I'm not listing him as my Oscar just because I had other issues and just, whatnot, but he has to be mentioned because...
That's cool.
Because that's how beautiful that artwork. That's how, that fold out of the Batcave. Come on, dude. That was amazing. Because
sure.
and page after page. I was like, wow, that was some really good artwork, and I had to gush about it.
And that's where my distinction is. There are things in that book. That's what stuck me with that book. There was times where I was picking up the next issue of that title. I didn't know why. I'm glad I stuck with it. for myself, for personal reasons. I'm glad I stuck with it. And I'll be interested to see when you actually read that, how you feel about, because I know some of the issues you didn't even read.
Right. Yeah, so I'm going to, and I'll actually sit down and I'll read through, and I'm probably going to keep picking up, as long as he's the artist on it, I will pick up the hardcover volumes that come out. And that's how I'm going to read it.
Are you going to give the Neil Adams stuff a shot?
He's got the next one who?
It's Frank Miller and Neil Adams. I don't think it's a sequel to this. I think it's a different story.
I don't know. To be honest, what I'll probably do is borrow yours and make the decision that way.
Okay. Because I'm a for sure, because I love Neil Adams.
Yeah.
And honestly, I like Miller a lot. This particular story for me, it took a while for me. I wouldn't say this is not going to ever go down as my favorite Batman story, but I like this much better than I like DK2, for example. I still got to see the conclusion of the whole thing before I can give my final comment on whether or not how I actually felt about the thing as a whole. Because there were certain characters I liked, but it's interesting. I'll be curious to see if we get a different kind of story with the Miller and Neil Adams one. I agree with you so much on the art, though. That was Jim Lee, Scott Williams with Alex Sinclair on the colors, and there were so many moments where I looked at those and I'm like, that needs to be a poster. If I got all the posters this year in 2007 that I saw in books, and I'm talking about just panels and that's kudos to artists throughout DC. Because there's people I'm not going to mention on this one when we talk about the arts. There's so many books where I just saw panels and pages and things like that. And I'm like, that needs to be a poster. My wife would divorce me if I had all those posters around my house, because I would literally need to put them everywhere. But that's great, because this is a visual medium, and you want to have those moments. And I don't always seek out those, the names and everything like that. I'm with you. I sometimes just enjoy it. And that's kind of a nice compliment to give somebody, too, in the sense that I just enjoyed your work. And that's ultimately when you put your pen to paper and you do all that, for me to say, hey, I remember you did the art on that. I enjoyed that. That's, what better compliment can I give somebody? And that's cool. But go ahead. I'm sorry. Because that wasn't your choice even.
Right. It's funny you should mention posters, because my other runner-up is an artist who I went out and bought a second issue of the comic just so I could cut out a 2-page spread and make it into a giant poster of a battle sequence they drew.
Cool.
I'm talking about Nicola Scott from Birds of Prey with that Birds of Prey versus the Secret Six battle. I have that battle that's spread out.
You know why I'm laughing?
Why?
Take a guess why I'm laughing.
Oh, okay. Let me guess. That's your number one, right?
Absolutely. And I didn't know that it was you. I figured we were completely in different ballparks. Go ahead.
Oh, no. I really enjoyed it. Now, the only reason why I didn't select, her to be my number one.
Oh, she isn't your number one?
No, she's not my number one.
Okay.
She's another runner-up. And the only reason why I didn't select her not to be my number one, because she's very talented and had to mention it just because I enjoyed it so much. But I had 3 artists who, as I was reading back issues of stuff, I caught myself saying, dang it, I wish they had drawn this individual comic, because they were 1 year later and beyond artists.
Okay.
And I went back, and got like issue 1 and all, and I'm rereading these old issues. So you wish
that consistently they had been all the way through.
I wish they had been throughout from the beginning, because I really liked how they drew the characters.
Nice. Okay.
And the 3 artists I'm talking about are Tony Daniel, from the Teen Titans.
Who's now on Batman.
Right. Scott McDaniel from Green Arrow. And, of course, Freddie Williams from Robin.
Wow.
Now, I had these 3 laid out, and it's, very powerful, passionate response for me, because, like, the 1 year later of Titans, it wasn't just Jeff Johns' writing, it was the art that got me going. And same thing with the Green Arrow. It wasn't just, Judd Winnick's writing, it was that art of Green Arrow. I'm like, oh, this looks cool. And once again, with Freddie, I said Adam Beechin is my kind of definition of what the Robin character is like. Freddie is my definition of what I want Robin to look like. I like how he drew it. And I had these 3 there, and I'm like, I need to pick one of them. And I sat down and I said, you know what? Of these 3, there's one of them who has kept me reading a title because they became the artist for that title. And that is Freddie Williams. I was ready to drop Flash out and out and say, I'm done with the Flash.
That's nice.
But because Freddie, as soon as I read one of Freddie's, I'm like, bam, this is it.
That's great.
Okay. And that's why he is getting my top artist, because he not only was this great Robin artist, he is now this great Flash artist for me.
We couldn't have had this discussion in the first 6 months of the show. Not on this level.
No.
You're a very different reader now. It's real interesting to see things from your perspective and just how you've got an emotional attachment now. It's really cool to see that. I'm just enjoying immensely hearing your reasoning for people that you chose. I love the work of, and actually it's funny, the people you mentioned are the same people I put down. Artists like Gene Haas, Scott McDaniel, Freddie Williams, Jamal Eigel, Ethan Van Sciver, Tony Daniels. These are all people I was looking at because I'm like, ooh, these people are batting very high for me. I also add Renato Arlem to that one, who is somebody who I really enjoyed. OMAC was the first time that I really started getting into that particular artist. And then, anything that Renato Arlem has done afterwards, I've really, really followed. Pete Woods was another artist that I looked at. And I just started going back through and looking at book after book after book. And it's so hard because I have very diverse visual tastes. I like, from Alex Ross, the photorealistic, to the very comic booky style art. I like pretty much everything in between. To me, part of my joy with the stack that I have is the sheer amount of different art in there, where it's everybody's doing their own kind of unique thing, and there's a different flavor when you pick up a different book. That, to me, is the nice part about reading comics is there's nothing cookie cutter about this. Mm-hmm. So this was another tough category. Nicola Scott, can she just stay on Birds of Prey forever?
Yeah.
Can we get that contract written? Is there any way we can do that? Because it was a number one choice for me. That I just looked at those issues and I'm like, she's the kind of person that demonstrates my personal taste in art, stuff that I notice. Really consistently drawn characters. No matter what angle you're coming at them from and things like that. It's just you're clear on who everybody is in the scene. I really like that. Beautiful backgrounds. I'm a background hound. They don't have to be in every single panel. I don't mean it that way, but I love backgrounds. When somebody takes the care and puts those details to set the mood and the setting for me. Swan Song. I kid you not. I looked at that panel where they're flying over in the boat. There's no superhero action to be mentioned in that particular panel. Just this beautiful sunlit scene. And I'm just like, that's art. That is gorgeous. Why is that not a poster? When can I get one? And that one I would frame. Without a doubt, and that would be in my room. They don't have a poster for it, but that would be one I would make room for sure, because I loved it that much. Wonderful use of visual motion when the characters are fighting, when they're moving, whatever they're doing. Emotion that resonates through the art. And I'm talking about, facial expressions, laughter, humor, anger, sadness. The mood of the characters is shown through the way they carry themselves, the way they're walking, they slouch down, whatever they're doing. It's never just one particular drawing of the character. The character changes in the overall way that they carry themselves, both in their face and throughout the body structure and everything throughout. It was just, when I heard she was staying on Birds of Prey, I was so excited, just because that visual consistency has been really important for me with Sean McKeever coming on board, because he's definitely taken the Birds in a new direction, and I'm liking the new direction a great deal, but I needed something to attach me to the old series, and Nicola Scott does that. She's a big component of that visual storytelling in that particular book, and visual storytelling from her is just wonderful. I'm really enjoying the McKeever run because of it. It's not, and I'm not knocking Sean McKeever. I'm enjoying what he's doing. His stuff on Titans right now I think is great. I'm getting used to his stuff on Birds of Prey and getting into it more. It's a run that's just beginning, so I'm getting a flavor for it. But Nicola Scott staying on board there has really been a big part of keeping me really excited about that book each month. I genuinely pick it up, look through it, and enjoy the storytelling. I think she and McKeever are going to have a really nice run on that book, and I'm enjoying that right now. So it's just a total geek out for me because of that. And that was a hard decision to make because I like so much in art. There's times where you'll say that you didn't really enjoy the art on something, and I'm kind of like, what? But I mean, it just shows the differences between the two of us. I have very diverse artistic tastes. Nobody's right or wrong in what they like and what they don't. It's my draw to the comic medium is that I like seeing different takes on characters and different styles in art. I like the visual medium aspect of it. And it was a hard decision for me as well. And going back through and looking at, Nicola Scott's been on since issue 100, and I know because I went all the way back to the issues that were in this year. But I had to go and see, when did she start, and where do I need to begin for 2007 for her? And I went back and looked at everything. And not just with her, I did that for all the artists that I mentioned. This was not easy, because we changed. We had originally done this from everything before August of 2007, and then because this became delayed, you and I said, to make it more relevant, let's make it for just 2007. So I had to change a lot of my categories, and I had to go back from scratch and redo this again. So we're talking about, we've each got 5 pages of notes on this just for the DC universe, and it was really, I had 5 pages before. These aren't the same 5 pages. So, I mean, I've done 10 pages of this right now because we had to change this, and I'm glad I did, because I really feel like this, at the end result, I'm going to be very proud of this episode, because I think you and I are going to give a very honest, emotional response as far as why we picked these particular books. And that one, it's just gorgeous art. And please keep her, if you move her off of Birds of Prey for whatever crazy reason, keep her on something, because I will follow her on anything. And I will follow her out of the company if they don't keep her. So that's the most sincere compliment. There are artists that I follow to other companies because they leave DC, or vice versa. There's artists that I geek out because they're finally coming to DC. Mark Bagley. I like Mark Bagley's art. I'm excited as hell that he's going to be on Trinity. Because it's going to be cool to see his take on a lot of these characters. But that is one of those things, that there are certain artists that I would love to see come to DC, and there's artists that I will follow beyond DC. But I hope they keep her, because she's just stellar, and it's amazing art. So 2007 for that year, I have no hesitation with her.
Okay, with colorists, here's another one that it was a tough one for me, because it is the whole art aspect of it. So what I did for this was I closed my eyes and I pictured which titles always just stood out and had that bang for me. And I came up with a couple different things. One, Green Lantern, Teen Titans, and Brave and the Bold. With the Green Lantern, there were a couple different colorists, but W. Moose Bauman was... Moose Bauman.
Yeah.
Moose Bauman was, one of the primary colorists, especially on some of these stories that I really...
Did you stop by Ethan Van Sciver's table at all during Wizard World Chicago?
No.
And I might be mispronouncing Ethan's last name. Moose Bauman was sitting next to him almost constantly. So, and very, very nice guy.
Oh, crud.
Very, very nice guy.
But and especially the Green Lantern titles that really just popped for me and stood out, I saw that, oh wow, he was the colorist. He was the colorist on that. With the Titans, the 1 year later, stories really had that wow factor that drew me in, and it was a lot to do with the colorists. And Richard and Tanya Hori continued on through 2007. Mm-hmm. They had some great stories with that Titans Around the World, Titans East, and even that really cool Devil May Care Kid Devil story. And so I was like, wow, these are some good stuff. And
those are names that Richard and Tanya Hori have popped up multiple times on books that you and I have just geeked out about the visual styles of as well.
So these are some really good stuff. And then, those Brave and the Bold, Tom Smith. There was just... It's really cool stuff, especially those opening sequences where it was the Green Lantern. You had that bright greenness of Green Lantern, and then you had the darkness of Batman. Then they had those fire scenes where it was just all those colors just dancing. I was like, wow, that is some good stuff. And I was sitting down going, dang it, I got to pick one of these. And I started just trying to pick just one of the 3. And then something kind of just, I'm like, oh my God, we had a issue that we were sitting there saying how much the colors just made the issue. It was just pure art form. I believe our exact words were, I want an absolute edition of this comic because these colors just popped out.
I have the hardcover of it as well.
Yeah. Of course, I am talking about JLA number 11, and Art Lyons was the colorist on that.
Art Lyon.
Oh, yeah. Sorry.
Only reason why I know that, and the only reason why I'm going to say that is I was referring to him as the plural as well, and there is actually only one of him. So I'm beyond that. But I did that for so long.
Sorry, but seriously, the colors really did make that issue. It was the writing, the art, the story was breath, but that colors are the theme music, the background. They're the Jaws theme as you're watching the person swim
cool.
through the water. That for me made that issue that made me just want to go, wow, this is cool. I want to hang this up on my wall as art, and that's why I had to go with him.
Yeah, that was honestly, this was a hard one for me too, because I really didn't want it to be like, well, I picked Art because Art was on the show. So I really fought against that. So it was a very tough go there, because I didn't want people to go, well, they're only picking people who are on the show and that type of thing. And you'll see, as you see all the way through this, there are people and books that we pick that have nothing to do with people that have been on the show. So anybody that I've ever had on the show probably had a strike against them by the fact that they've been on the show, because I was making sure I didn't pick them for that reason. This was such a year for me as far as education, and I was actually not going to pick a colorist, because I felt like this is not a category I'm very strong in. But then I went back and I said to myself, no, you know what? I know books where I've emotionally felt drawn to the colors, just for the reasons that you mentioned. So I went back through, I looked at a lot of books. I looked through a lot of Brave and the Bold, you're right, because Brave and the Bold has been beautiful. I like a lot of Ethan Van Sciver's art, though. The great thing about him is he's always paired with, a good colorist, and it's Moose Ballman in most cases. And Moose Ballman's, his stuff has been just really, we talked about the colors when we were raving about the one-shot. And when I looked back through it again, I'm like, oh, this really does look very, very good. I went with Art Lyon for the exact reason that you said, because it is something that I think made me realize I need to start taking more notice of this. And it was done not because I sought Art on to have him on the show for that particular issue. I sent him an email and I said for him, word for word, I really want to have you on for JLA number 11. I think it's a very important issue. So it was something where I really wanted to have him on. So this is not in response to him agreeing to come onto the show. It was more I sought him out because of that. We've been very fortunate that we had Art and Alan Pasalacqua, who I'm going to give a quick shout out to, because JLA Classified number 49 came out, and it's a self-contained book. The artwork is beautiful on there. The colors, it's another great example of Alan's work in colors. It was a very unique experience. But for anybody who wants to get a taste for those classified books and you haven't read any of them, and you're like, I don't know where to jump on because these are 4 to 5 issue stories. Where do I jump on this book? 49 is a great point to jump on because it's a one-shot. So even if you pick it up and you're kind of like, well, this isn't the book for me, you got the complete story, which is really cool for a new reader. So I would recommend picking up JLA 49, JLA Classified number 49, to check that out and check out some of Alan Pasalacqua's work, where he has a credit too for the colors, which is great. He's also coloring issues 50 and 51, which feature legends Roger Stern and John Byrne. And I was excited for him just because we've known him for so long since the show, just to see his name up there with those legends on those particular issues. That's a multi-part storyline. It's either 4 or 5 parts. I'm currently reading that one. I'm up to issue 51 on that particular title, and I'm enjoying that. It's nice to see John Byrne in there, and there's a lot of energy in that story. He and Roger Stern are working really well together. Alan's just really on board with that. But 49 is really the issue I'd recommend for people to pick up as a starting point. Really great self-contained issue, JLA issue, so it's great. But once again, not because he was on the show, but the colors in that book told me a story, and I loved that. The colors really were a character. The feeling of claustrophobia, the sheer amount of care that went into the colors and the shading from the beginning straight through to the escape. We were talking about the water scenes and the changing tones on the costumes, the facial features and things like that. It was so hard to choose, and because of that, because of the fact that we know him so well. But I am so completely justified in this decision because we have people on because we love their work. And there's so many people on that I want to have on that we just haven't had the time to have on yet, just because of the fact that we're not strictly an interview podcast. We talk about the books first and foremost. But I am so glad we got to talk to him about JLA number 11 because it made me appreciate colorists throughout the DC universe and the amount of care and hard work that goes into their jobs. So kudos to Art Lyon. I feel completely justified in picking him for his work on that particular issue and how it educated me. And I also want to give a shout out to colorists in general, in that I appreciate you in a way after 2007 that I just I can honestly say that I never have before. The work that you do, the care that you put in this, especially those of you that really do put in that extra mile, where you look at a panel and you say, you know what, let me try this, let me try that, and do all that. You guys, thank you, Alan Paslakwa, for educating us. Thank you to colorists out there, Moose Ballman, just Tom Smith you were talking about. I can just go on and on. Hi-Fi Designs is doing the stuff on Birds of Prey, because I looked at those issues as well, because I'm loving the colors there. I could go on and on. Tanya and Richard Horry you were talking about before. Just colors that are just doing Guy Major on Robin.
Yeah. Yes.
That's another one that I'm just throwing off the top of my head that I'm thinking of that I've noticed now. I am looking and paying attention to colors a lot more because I'm appreciating what you people are doing out there. So just keep it coming. Thank you so much. The work, Jonah Hex. Jonah Hex, to me, colors and mood and atmosphere that's set in Jonah Hex. If that's so, the colors in that book is along with the great art, but it really sets a different time period in Jonah Hex. That's one I've just geeked out about for since it's been out because of the atmosphere and mood. So kudos to the colors. Congratulations. Thank you, Art Lion, for JLA number 11 because it was a very special issue and one where it taught me something. Inker.
Here's the thing with Inker.
Mm-hmm.
I am really not comfortable in making a pick of one person.
Okay.
I'm still learning, about the Inker and what the Inker does. Now, I know a lot of the stuff that I enjoyed from the art, from the pencils, from the colors,
sure,
were really accented by the Inker, but I can't separate those two yet.
Good.
So I know, stuff from Bob Wyachek's stuff on Brave and the Bold, I know his inking accented some of those colors I just gushed about. Same thing with Gene Ha.
Accented the pencils, you mean?
Yeah, accented the pencils.
George Perez.
Right. I know that his inking accented the stuff that I was just gushing about. I also know, like Gene Ha on JLA number 11, he had a strong factor in our enjoyment.
He was the penciler.
He was also the inker.
Well, yeah, because it was his own work.
Right.
Yeah, so he had no right.
So it's And,
I see your point, though. I mean, you're right. Absolutely, he did. Good.
Yeah, just like Art Thibert, Kevin Conrad, Jonathan
T-Bear.
Oh, what'd I say?
Thibert.
Sorry, Art Thibert, Kevin Conrad, T-Bear, Art T-Bear. Man, I am just butchering the name. Sorry.
No,
Art
you know
T-Bear.
what? It's the funny part is every time you say it, the reason why I do that is not because you're saying it. I hear myself saying it that way because I did it for so long. So it is. I should clarify that. It's not so much that I'm correcting you. I'm keeping what you're saying out of my head so I don't go back to it. Because a lot of times, before we even did this podcast, I just read the names from the book, so I learned how to butcher them at a very young age. So I've been reconditioning myself on the show when I learn names to try and correct all the ones that I butcher, and I don't do a good job. So when I know I'm getting one right, and you start saying it the way I used to, don't take it personally.
Oh no,
is what I'm
no.
trying to say. It's more of a no.
Okay.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Let me get through that correctly this time.
Okay.
I also know that Art T-Bear, Kevin Conrad, and Jonathan Galpion work on the Teen Titans. Really accented all the art and colorings that I was gushing about. I know those three did it, but I don't know how to say this on this thing, this on this one. Now, Inker is something I am going to study a little bit more on, and next year I will have an Inker, but I had to throw out these shout-outs to these people that worked on these books that I thought were wonderful. And I wish I could say you're the person who really accented this penciler's work, but I don't know.
It was funny. In August, I skipped this category for just the same reasons that you said, and it was really more of I'm not going to do a half-assed job with this category. I really wanted to make sure that I knew who. And I didn't know enough about inking. Since Bob came on our show and really educated us, but really, not just Bob, it's funny, the Fourth World Omnibuses opened my eyes. The inker switches between the second volume and the third volume. Mike Royer takes over for the inking in the third volume. So you get to actually see two very different inkers working on the work of the great Jack Kirby. So it really just for me, I was reading it, and then I read some of the background information that was in there as far as the switch of the inkers and what Kirby liked about one versus the other and that type of thing. And it really kind of opened my eyes to inking and gave me some background so that I could go and make my own choice. So this was not an easy one either, because I had to go back through then in my favorite issues where I enjoyed the pencils, and I had to go back through and look who the inker was. And it was funny, I had the omnibuses right by me, and I was kind of looking at difference in line work and what was going on there. I am not an expert on this category at all, and I'm going to state that as a fact. I am a learner, very similar to colorists. I am learning and all that, but I did feel confident. I went through all my issues, and I picked Doug Hazelwood, along with Nicola Scott. Jumped on Birds of Prey with issue 100, and just being able to look at differences between different inkers and things like that, and what I like and things like that. It's always been easy to tell a good-looking book. But these two really understand these characters. They understand the art style that they're going for here, and really how to complement each other. It's a great partnership on that particular title. I really, really like and enjoy it. And it was something to see the difference between partnerships on the Fourth World Omnibus really started to click for me what I like in partnerships between the inker and the penciler. So I felt very confident saying that I really enjoyed Doug Hazelwood with Nicola Scott, because I looked through every single one of those issues, and really the two of them work very well together. It's a good-looking book. And so kudos, really just a nice shout-out to Doug Hazelwood. A lot of great inkers at DC. Throughout 2008, I'm going to continue learning about this particular about inking and what it's all about, and I want to continue, increasing my knowledge of it, like you mentioned, because it's not an area I'm very strong in, but I feel like I'm learning more, and I agree with you in the sense that I don't feel I'm the best judge of inking, but I know what I like visually in partnerships. And that is a partnership that I'm really, really enjoying. And I did see the difference in partnerships in that Fourth World Omnibus series. It's a great series. That I'll talk more about that in a little bit. But did you have a best editor? Would you?
Well, here's the funny thing about editor.
Mm-hmm.
I really don't know what an editor does. I think I've asked the question. I posted the question out there once, and the only answer I ever got from somebody, they babysit the creative team. Okay, that's not really an answer what they do. I don't know what an editor does, so I really can't say this is my pick for an editor if I don't know what the job is.
Well, that's really oversimplifying what an editor does.
I know, I need
they
more
really
research.
are the one, they take a look at the book, and they, their job is to try and, catch continuity errors and storytelling errors, and, really kind of help the writer, the art team, if there's a problem with the age of a character that was drawn, where all of a sudden a character looks drastically younger or older than they are, to get back and correct that. Art shared it with the colors, where the editor came back and just said that, no, this coloring choice you're going for, I want you to do this instead. And then that was sent back to him. And, that's drastically oversimplifying the intense amount of work that it is to be an editor, especially if you're on multiple titles. So it was really, can you tell I started looking up on the internet what an editor does before I did this? I really kind of delved into this one. So you don't have an editor.
Yeah, this is another one that next year I will have an editor, but I got to do research and figure out what the heck they do before I can say this is who I like.
For the exact same reasons you stated, I actually started looking up and seeing what an editor does, and really started thinking about the titles that I enjoyed, the editorial work of that editor. They put that together. It's really a behind-the-scenes job that is really, like letter is a category we don't even have, and it's one I want to add. I really want to spend this year. It's no insult to letterers. I got to get good at that. And I really know when I enjoy when a letterer is doing something neat on the book, but and I've mentioned that with things like Jonah Hex. The lettering on Jonah Hex I think is really cool, but I got to get more educated on that. These categories I put down there because I felt confident with my choices. Editor, I went with Mike Carlin. He does Countdown. He's taken over from Mike Martz on Countdown. But it's not just that. All New Adam, Birds of Prey, recent various Green Arrow titles, including the ending of the previous Green Arrow series, the wedding stuff, the Black Canary miniseries, straight on through to the current Green Arrow Black Canary. JLA and JSA Classified. Shazam and the Monster Society of Evil, which I thought was a really amazing take on the classic tale. how do you handle editorial on all those titles with so many creators involved, but still get these books out on time? And I'm going to give a little leeway with regards to Monster Side of Evil, because that took years to get together, but that was just, it was a special Jeff Smith project, so that's beside the point. But he was involved with the characters that I really cared about in 2007, took over and continued to coordinate Countdown, which has continued DC's weekly streak, which to me is impressive. And I got to give mention to Mike Martz and the whole editorial team. Because we talk about people like Elizabeth V. Gerlin, and I mean, go on and on. There's other people that have been involved in that title. But forget whether or not you're enjoying it for a second. The whole thing's been very well coordinated to keep it going, which is very impressive considering everything that's going on in the DC Universe. But speaking for myself, I've loved the Countdown ride to this point. I look at this as a 52-issue story. I'm enjoying the build. I've enjoyed the build all along. Every so often there's reveals that pop up, there's events that happen that change the path that characters go on. I'm really enjoying that. There's stories like Mary Marvel, which I'm just completely gushing over, and I've completely enjoyed all the way through. I enjoyed Monarch stuff all the way through. Jimmy Olsen's been a very fun ride. The Rogues. There's a lot in that book that just, to me, week after week has been worth tuning in for. There's always one story in every issue that's made it worth me reading that issue. And very similar to 52, even though the storytelling here is very different, when one thing's building, there's been something that's got something going on that's keeping me in that book and keeping me picking it up. It's been a different ride, a very different ride, but I've enjoyed it, and it's something where editorial. But, I mean, you can't argue over the stuff that's going on with All New Adam, Green Arrow, Black Canary, and Birds of Prey. It's, wow. You know, what else can I say? I think he's just been an editor that I can't imagine what his day looks like. And kudos to Mike Carlin for just those great books, because he's dealing with some really big titles there. And so what about best moment of the year for you?
Moment of the year. Oh, so many to choose from. Mm-hmm. Oh, whether it's Black Adam ripping somebody in half, or Black Adam ripping somebody's arm off, or hey, can't forget his special dietary plan that he had in his own limited series.
Sure.
And Osiris flying through somebody. You got you got Sobek, and his mid-afternoon snack, and of course there's Superman Prime, who gave Risk a matching set of arms.
You really have a ongoing theme here.
You notice the theme.
It's a very demented theme. Like for a minute there, I thought you were doing your own ad for Deal-A-Meal, but then it changed. So it's like
you notice the theme, but. Now, the funny thing is, all these were great moments, and I truly enjoyed them, and I laughed because I have a sick sense of humor. Mm-hmm. But I am a fan of hero comics. And for me, my moment of the year was positive, and I have two. It's a tie. I cannot pick between the two.
Fine.
Wah. Deal with it if you guys don't like it. And the one actually is kind of almost, you could even say, is a 2006 event. I don't care. I'm calling it.
You're getting sassy.
Exactly. And they are the return of the JSA and JLA. I think that for me was a really wow moment that you have both of these teams coming back. You look at the events that ended, 52 that ended with even the end of Identity Crisis, Infinite Crisis, all this negative stuff that was hitting the hero unit. The comeback of these two great powerhouse teams was really cool. We have the rebuilding of the Hall of Justice in Washington, D.C., just the layout of what that was. You got the return of the brownstone of the JSA, their base, and how they're bringing in these young heroes. I was like, you know what? For me, that was my wow moment, my yes moment, that the return of the hero. And that's what I'm going with.
My best moment of the year, and wow, good choice, real good choice, but my best moment was the teaser for The Darkest Night at the end of Sinestro Corps War. The crossover itself was amazing, and throughout the whole thing, I'm like, okay, how do you top this? I mean, you're Jeff Johns, you've kind of really dealt your big card here. So how do you top that? You see that at the end, and it made me start thinking of all the dead characters and their relation to the particular Corps members. Ones that we saw die in the Sinestro Corps War. Ones that we've seen die in previous issues of their own selective titles throughout the years. Kyle in particular has got a whole battery full of people that could come back. But then if you start going outside of the Green Lantern Corps, think about all the heroes in the DC Universe and people who have died and what that could mean and what those people come back. And how are those people going to come back? Are they going to remember anything of their previous life? Are they going to be bitter? Are some of them going to turn on the this new black core? What does that all mean? I don't know. What is that going to look like? It made me think of a lot of different possibilities and how this could be. Emotional trauma that people are going to go through when they come back. It just sounds like a really cool concept, real cool story. It was the best moment of the year because it made me excited for that story, which is so far away.
That's actually, that's a good one, dude. I didn't even think of it, but hearing you talk, I'm like, yeah, that was a wow moment. Just, yeah.
So anything that just makes me like sit there and drool, I mean, I can't stop thinking about this. I think it's just a great thing because it's making me speculate on what could not happen, and there's all kinds of different possibilities and avenues of that story. It just looks cool. It looks really, really cool. So I'm excited to see how that goes. I did an extra category, which is a big shock that I want to gab about something else. It's I'm usually very quiet and timid, but I actually did Best Collected Edition for myself because I just really felt like I really want to talk about this because I've been collecting a lot of collected editions over this year. So it's something for me that's very close to me because I'm enjoying the way there's showcase volumes coming out, hardcovers, trades of, stuff that I've read and enjoyed and new stuff that I had never read previously that they're finally giving me an opportunity to read. And I went on that. First of all, my honorable mentions go to Absolute Sandman, which I think is just a visually stunning, not only the interiors, but the exterior, the way that was designed and laid out. Those volumes just look really good on a shelf. They open them up. They feel like they feel like a tome that is, it's something that belongs in fantasy. Like you would see in The Hobbit or something like that, somebody carrying around this book. You know what I mean? It's like a wizard's tome or something, which so fits the fantasy aspect of the Sandman. Go ahead.
It's funny you mentioned that because I actually, when I first bought the first volume, I kind of had buyer's remorse. I was like, man, I did drop a lot of money on this, on this Absolute Edition. But the second I cracked it open, I was like, oh, yeah, it's worth it.
Oh, yeah.
And sure enough, I got the second, and I'll continue. I'll get the full volumes.
Oh, but, yeah. I mean, it's just going to be a great way to have that series. And I actually hope that they make another volume that collects the Death volumes, which would take one Absolute to get the Death stuff, but it's his work with just the character of Death, Sandman's sister, and those could be collected in one volume, and I hope they do that because that belongs with that series. And maybe if they don't collect the Matt Wagner, there was a single Matt Wagner issue that was like, it was a Sandman Mystery Theater that connected with, did you read the first Absolute Sandman?
I'm not completely through it.
Have you read the bit where Dream was captured?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. There is a Sandman Mystery Theater story that takes place concurrently with that where he runs into Dream.
Oh, okay.
And it's really a story. It was called Sandman Midnight Theater, I believe is the title of it. It was a one-shot prestige format, but I'd like to see that and Death collected in, if that's not going to be collected as a backup in one, it should be actually in the Sandman volumes as a backup feature. But if it's not, it should be, they should do a second one where it's really, because I think it was Wagner and I think it was Neil Gaiman also did. I'm not sure. But it's a great story. It belongs in there. So, and it'd be good supplemental material if it's not. They could easily do a supplemental volume. But that was one of my considerations. And the other consideration was Shazam and the Monster Society of Evil, the hardcover. I collected all the prestige format issues of that. When I heard a hardcover was coming out, I liked issue 1 and 2 so much, I just ordered it, and I waited to finish reading it until the hardcover came out. The hardcover was a little bigger than the individual issues, so the art was a little bigger. And I like Jeff Smith's art a great deal. It's a beautiful volume. It looks really great. The other cool thing was the individual issues of Monster Society of Evil formed a giant cover. The fold-out hardcover dust jacket folds out into that giant poster. So, normally how it's like, these are cool that you connect them together, but what if I want to actually just be able to see them that way without going through that process? This had the fold-out cover that did that. It had its own little cover dust jacket for the actual hardcover, but then it folded out into that. How cool is that? I just thought it was really neat as a little bonus. But that particular collection had the secret decoder in the back where the chapter titles were in the secret code. So you had to use the decoder to figure out the chapter titles, which was kind of cool. And I guess the secret decoding is going to continue into the Johnny DC title, which is not by Jeff Smith, but it's going to branch off of that. So I'm really excited about that because I really was into that whole 4-issue prestige format volume. They were endearing characters. They were a lot of fun. It was not a watered down story. There was a lot of depth to it. This is what I want to read in all ages material. So I really enjoyed that. It was a DC release. It wasn't a Johnny DC title. So I feel very comfortable putting that in there. But that's an honorable mention. For me, the Fourth World Omnibuses were my number one choice of collected edition. I admitted on the show that I always understood Kirby's contribution. I read some of his stuff from over at Marvel and enjoyed it. But I never was what I would call a Kirby-aholic. Where I understood why people got that way and what they liked about him, but I just never got it, so to speak. These made me get it. Made me understand who he is, the magic of Kirby, the genius of Kirby, the imagination of Kirby. And also made me appreciate characters that, I kind of, New Gods, all right, kind of liked them. But, I never was really super attached to any of them. I'm going to go seek out all kinds of New God stuff after this, by other writers. Walt Simonson, I know, did some great stuff with them. I'm going to go seek out solo titles. I know Mr. Miracle had a great solo series, which I have not read. I'm going to go back through and read that. It's just, these characters now, I'm really, really into them. What he did was, the issues in the omnibus are collected in chronological release order. Kirby, in his own way, very similar to Seven Soldiers that we talked. We are going to go back to that someday. We're not ignoring it. It's just you see what we run into in the show. When do we have time? But we're going to get to that. But barring that, similar to Seven Soldiers, Kirby was doing that way back then, where there was a backstory involving Darkseid as he appeared in the issues and his quest, to basically rule all. And, it was such great stuff. Great characters, the Forever People. I get these characters. I get them. He's a brilliant creator. It made me appreciate inking styles. They're two very different inkers. I actually liked both versions of the art. But it showed me what an inker brings to the table and how it changes the tone and the mood and the presentation of the penciler. They're just wonderful volumes, and if you've been on the fence at all at grabbing them, do yourself a favor and grab them. I'm currently in the middle of Volume 3, which has a wonderful issue called The Pact. You may not consider that a 2000... I don't remember if that was released in... The first two volumes were definitely released in 2007, so I'm counting those. But Volume 3 has this wonderful issue called The Pact that explains the pact involving Orion and Scott Free, and the issues that went on there as far as why one wound up on Apocalypse, why one on New Genesis, and I'll leave it at that for anybody who's interested in reading it. But there's a lot of background in there, and it's a cool story. They're just great volumes, and I can't wait till it's nice because I'm at the point right now where I'm midway through Volume 3, so when Volume 4 gets here, which will be the first time since Volume 1, I'll actually be ready to start Volume 4 when it arrives. Which is probably the most sincere compliment I can give to this, because I get a lot of collected editions. I've got every showcase, and I'm looking at them and I'm like, I'm grabbing them selectively and starting to read them. It's, I like that they're going to be there because I'm going to be able to read them. And somewhere in my life, I'm going to be able to start sitting down and reading these gradually. It'll probably be long after you and I are done with podcasting. But I am gradually going through and reading them and enjoying them, and I'm thrilled that I have them. But they're 500 pages each. With the amount of monthly books that I read, I'm stockpiling those. And I'm stockpiling a whole lot of other stuff outside of that I'm collecting as well. But it's nice to just have so much reading material to choose from. Those are ones, though, the sincerest compliment I can give the Fourth World Omnibuses. When I'm done reading one, I immediately start grabbing another. And I go through, and that's including all of the current continuity stuff that I'm reading and enjoying. So for me to go to stuff that is older material and really rush to read it, that's the best compliment I can give that particular series of books. And it's just, I can't recommend it enough if you are interested at all in the New Gods. I would recommend starting with Death of the New Gods by Jim Starlin, because it's a lower price point for anybody who's kind of like, Sean, you're asking for a big financial investment. If you like the characters in there, it's very worth seeking out the Fourth World Omnibuses. Check your local library and see if you can get them to buy them, because it's good material for a local library if you don't want to make the investment yourself, especially if you're a college student or high school student or something like that, and you happen to listen to our show and you're kind of like, Sean, I don't have the money to buy that. Those are places to go and to consider getting those books. But the Kirby stuff, if that's not in the library, I don't know what. That's got to be in there. Sandman's another one. These absolutes should be in a library. There's no argument there. Those should be in a library. That's that stuff's collected for a reason. It's literature, and it should be there. So I don't know. That's kind of it for me. Wow, that was just the DC universe.
What time is it, by the way?
Jim, we're about 2.5 hours in, and it's about 7:15. Wow.
Yeah.
I wanted to share this email just because I made a little joke about it at the beginning. This one's from Dan Taube, Taube. Hello, Sean and Jim. I'm currently listening to episode 59 and finding it very enjoyable. I thought it was funny that one listener wanted you not to laugh so much, and I agree with you guys wholeheartedly. You are who you are, and that's part of what makes the podcast so entertaining. However, there is more an observation here than a criticism. The whole Countdown arena as part of the main Countdown story debate. Hopefully the next part I get your names right. Sean is the elementary school teacher and Jim is the banker, right? And yep, you're absolutely correct. Sean, you seem a little too determined to rip apart Jim's ideas on this count. I think you should spend more time critiquing the comics and less time critiquing Jim. I think it's entertaining when you have different ideas about which comics are good or bad and why. But when Jim has an idea or a concept about how a particular comic might be more effective if it was a little different, there really isn't any purpose for you to critique that other than to say, yes, I would like that, or no, I wouldn't. In 59, it seems like you, Sean, were determined to stay on that topic until you convinced Jim it was a bad idea. Also, you changed your reasoning halfway through. You kept on saying you didn't think it belonged in the main Countdown story, content-wise. Then, towards the end, you said, well, it's a money thing. People wouldn't want to pay the extra money. It's a business thing. Here's my weigh-in on the issue. The first 25 issues of Countdown were extremely boring. And I don't mean just from lack of action. There was no character development, and one issue did not connect very well in the next. About half of the material they had in there could easily have been compressed or cut, for example, Flash's funeral, so that they got to the turning point in issue 26 a lot earlier and could have made Arena part of the main story. If Arena is as popular as you guys say it is, there would have been a lot less Countdown sucks buzz out there. I, for one, would have never continued reading Countdown if it weren't for you guys, because the initial story was so unfocused and so all over the place. If they could have used some of Arena or Death of the New Gods or even Lord Havoc in the main storyline, I think the initial run of Countdown would have been more popular. It is the editor's job to make the stuff fit without making a bigger book. So it's really not a business issue, it's a content one. The content in the beginning of Countdown was extremely flat and stale. Now, some of the cool stuff coming out of the tie-ins, cool. And it actually shows some creativity. I think Jim was merely responding to the creativity by saying, wouldn't it have been nice if more of this creativity early on in the run, before it started to lose so many readers, myself included. I think the 52-issue format worked in 52 because the complexity of the story supported it. I don't think 52 issues has worked so well for Countdown. But if they cut more of the fat and incorporated some of the tie-in stuff, maybe it would have been a better story. Sorry if I seem anti-Sean. I'm not. You definitely put the raging in Raging Bullets. This time round, though, you seem a little harsh on poor Jim. Lighten up or I may need to send Margot Kidder to your window. Thanks for the quality podcast. It continues to be the top of my comics podcasting listening while I'm driving. And that's from Dan Taube. Just to clarify one thing, I did not contradict myself. Our discussion evolved in a different direction. We started out by initially talking about the fact that we could plug some of that stuff into the story. And the problem is we both enjoyed Countdown. So if you plug that into the story, what are you going to take out? What are you going to change in order to do that? I understand that you're saying that editorial could change that, but you got to remember, Jim and I actually both liked this thing. So because of that, to actually go back and change some of the story means that you could possibly ruin it for the both of us. Which then is a content issue. Totally agree with you. But then the discussion evolved to, well, then we could look at them as backup stories. The problem is if you start adding those backups in, you're going to start having an anthology style because a lot of these miniseries really need all of the content that's in them. So I know you're saying that you can edit certain things down. Yeah, maybe, but even if you take out a page or two out of a 4-issue mini, you're still going to be taking up quite a bit in the space in the back of Countdown in order to put that in there, which means you're increasing the price point. And that's where that discussion came in. So it evolved to that. So it wasn't really contradicting myself. It was just that our discussion changed at that point in time. So it wasn't really the same discussion all the way through. We kind of went in a lot of different directions with this. So you're kind of oversimplifying the discussion. There's a couple funny things, I think. You start off this email by saying that you thought it was funny that a listener thought we laughed too much and that we are who we are and that's what makes the podcast so entertaining. But then you should say we should be less of who we are. It doesn't make any sense. A couple quick things. There is a little misconception here, and it's funny. Jim will totally agree with me on this one. He's not here right now, but think back to every Countdown episode. Jim likes Countdown as much as I do, and there's actually segments of Countdown that Jim likes more than I do. So the first 25 issues, your argument about that, as far as defending Jim's point of view, that wasn't what Jim was saying. Jim was hypothetically saying ways that stuff could have been put in there to make it more interesting. The problem with that argument is that I'm like, you liked this book the way it is, so how would you want something changed? Neither here nor there. The funny part, though, is Jim deliberately kept that topic hidden from me. And Jim and I have known each other for 20-some-odd years because he wanted that reaction from me. He deliberately hides things from me. Go back through the history of Raging Bullets because he wants to rile me up and get that going, and he wanted that honest reaction. The dude was laughing the entire time of the conversation. We're not a video podcast. You can't see that. It was the whole point of this whole discussion. Plus, if you listen back to the conversation, it wasn't just me continuing the conversation. The ice cream discussion was started by Jim, and it came much later in our discussion, and it wound up being a very funny bit. Personally, one of the things I love about Jim is he thinks outside of the box, just like you're saying, and he throws out topics that I would have never in a million years started. But the whole debate about the miniseries and how they could have been handled is very interesting. You could interview 100 people who are reading Countdown, and everyone's going to have a different opinion about it. I think it was a point to having that discussion, and there was a point to continuing it because, yes, I agree with you, Jim, or no, I don't agree with you, Jim, is far less interesting than the discussion that we got on, I think. That's just my own personal opinion, and whether you agree or disagree is fine, but I had fun having that discussion either way. And yes, absolutely, I was ranting and raving and trying to get my point across, just like Jim was trying to get his point across. Once again, that's how we got on the ice cream discussion to begin with, because he threw it out there. And yes, I certainly, when he came back with that one, was going to go right after it, because, it's a matter of a debate. That's what a debate is. And if you take a look on the forum, even though I had that lengthy rant, pretty universally on the forum, the reaction is from our forum members that Jim was right. So I guess I don't see the point in the argument as far as, I should have pulled back or something like that. I think people are able to listen to any of our discussions and make their own judgment. I think people know when they agree with me and when they don't. Typically, in those cases, Jim does come off as the sympathetic guy, which is really funny considering he set me up on that one. But that's part of the charm. It's part of who Jim is. I have nothing but 110% respect for Jim. That's just the kind of guy that he is. He did follow up and say, Dan did follow up and say, in an earlier email, I compared you guys to the Siskel and Ebert of comics podcasts, which, if you knew me, is an enormous compliment. I read everything that Roger Ebert writes. It is a passionate debate that you guys have that I appreciate so much. I understand there's a dynamic between the two of you, as an outside observer don't always get. That's why I categorize my email as an observation, not a critique. That you might be interested in how it sounds sometime to someone who doesn't know you guys. It is clear that you clearly are passionately enjoying Countdown and all of its tie-ins, but you know the DC Universe far better than I would say most people, certainly me. I have been reading DC Comics for like a good 30 years or so, and while I have a good handle on the Batman universe and the Superman mythos, even the Green Lantern Corps stuff is new to me. Like in the last year, I would read the occasional Elseworlds title, but it wasn't until 52 that I realized different worlds actually existed within the DC Universe. I always assumed Elseworlds was like Marvel's What If, so a lot of Countdown has been very confusing to me until lately. Actually, if not for your podcast, I would not understand half of it. So I just felt Jim was providing a worthwhile what if they had done this that might have made Countdown somewhat more accessible to more people who are less familiar with all the aspects of the DC Universe than you are. Definitely my email to you is not meant to slam or one of those typical internet flames. I shudder at the thought, but when I'm expressing my opinion, I am very often blunt in my language and tone. I am also a theater director, and perhaps it was the director in me unintentionally directing your episode. I don't feel bad for Jim per se. I just thought you might like to know how some of your debates sometimes sound to people who don't know you. But on the positive, your podcast remains my favorite. I anticipate new episodes as much as I anticipate new comics, as it constantly gives me new insights into what I thought were old characters. I am reading Arena and Lord Havoc on your recommendations alone, and as a result of your comments you made during episode 59, plan on picking up Death of the New Gods this week. Keep up the good work. You have a listener for life, or however long you keep doing the show. Dan Tobby. And you know what? Like I said, this is always about honest debate on here. You got to remember, we have done like 100-some-odd episodes. People can go through our back catalog, and you're going to eventually get what we're doing here. There's times where I'm right. There's times where Jim's right. There's times where Jim's wrong. There's times where I'm right. Who cares? That's not what this is all about. It's about sharing honest opinions, just like yours. And that's why I will never back off from somebody's opinion on the show, positive or negative. But in this particular case, the problem is Jim is not this longtime DC fan. You've been reading DC longer than Jim has. And, that's where the debate kind of loses some steam for me. There's all kinds of ways maybe Countdown could have been more accessible. It's very hard, I think, for Jim and I to see that. And myself, you're right, to a certain extent, myself, because I'm thoroughly enjoying it. So it is hard for me to get into the head. I do try to air those comments on the show, though, to do that. And you can look over the internet for people who are slamming Countdown. I mean, that's not hard to find. But I guess my point was I was coming from the perspective as somebody who's enjoying it, I wouldn't want somebody to wreck what I've already been enjoying. And I look at plugging some of those things in as, first of all, Death of the New Gods. Once you read that, you're going to see the amount of content of Death of the New Gods in no way, shape, or form could have been plugged into Countdown. And if it was, it would have ruined how great Death of the New Gods is. I'll go on the record and say right now, I love Countdown, but Death of the New Gods blows it out of the water. And I mean, there's no A or B on it. Death of the New Gods is just an outstanding miniseries. So if you want to get into comparisons on that, I'm enjoying Countdown. Haven't had a bad thing to say about it. I'm having a good ride on that particular book. But Death of the New Gods is in a completely different category. And if you're not reading Death of the New Gods, you need to be reading that book. I mean, I've said that multiple times. And I'll go on another step and say I enjoyed Countdown Arena. I'm enjoying Lord Havoc and the Extremists. Death of the New Gods blows both of those out of the water as well. It's that good. So if you are reading Arena and Lord Havoc and enjoying either of those, I would say if you have no room in your budget for anything else, Death of the New Gods needs to take the place of one of those. Well, it's kind of too late for Arena, but that is a book that you need to be reading, though, Death of the New Gods. I do appreciate your honest comments, and that's why when I sent you back an email, I wanted to make sure to get that email back on the show to get your reply and your response on there. I appreciate the honesty. Jim and I can't be anything other than what we are, and yeah, sure, I definitely went after him, and he wanted that. Jim set me up on that one. And you got to remember that. Those are some things that Jim does sometimes. Go back to our Watchmen episode, where Jim started off his Watchmen review by saying that he hated it. There are little things that Jim does, and he plans to get me ranting and raving and doing all that, and it's part of Jim's charm, and it's part of what makes the show what it is. So, no, that stuff's not going to stop, and I'm not going to water that down, and, I'm sorry if you think that that's going to confuse people who are listening to the show. I think 2 or 3 episodes into our show, if you haven't got our dynamic, we're not that complicated of people. So, and I'm speaking for myself on that one too. I'm really not that complex a guy. It really is easy to kind of figure out where I'm coming from. So, I don't know, just kind of a thought. And just to get one more quick email in before I close off the show. Dear Sean and Jim, hey guys, I'm not sure if you remember, but around Christmas I made a post on your forums with a similar username to my email addy, asking for recommendations. And I did, however, have a few unexpected bills, like having to pay for a new computer. But to cut a long story short, a few days ago, while waiting to meet a friend in town, I decided to check out the local bookstore. And I know they've sold trade paperbacks before, and I went and found their comic book section had expanded. So after a quick browsing, I decided to pick up 52 Volume 1. Always intended on picking this up at some point, as the characters of Montoya and the Question have always interested me. I'm also digging Ralph, as many years ago he was the first DC hero I'd ever read, back with an appearance with the Flash, so it was cool to see him again. I then sat down and listened to your episodes about the first 13 issues while I read on my third read-through, and I'm loving it. I, like Jim, had something of a this is cool moment when Whisper just told the boys to kill Charlie and Renee instead of giving a big roll-off of her plans, etc., etc., etc. But 52, despite its awesomeness, wasn't enough hold for me, so I picked up some of the lead-in titles to go along with my April place DCBS order, such as Countdown 13 to 12, Wonder Woman 13 to 16, Simon Dark 1 to 3, Teen Titans 55, and Detective Comics 841. I have to say, and I know this is long, so feel free to cut it down. This is my email if you decide to read it out. Despite my previous dislike of Wonder Woman, mostly because I used to think the costume was goofy and a little dumb, after reading 13, especially the part at the school with the young shy girl, I fell in love with the character. And Gail Simone's work so far has totally sucked me in and made me want to learn more about her and read more. I have to say, darn it, I didn't get suckered into a title like Batman, but I did. I loved the issues, 841. It was a cool, what I assume is a standalone story. I liked Batman in this, despite having not really liked his character before. I really liked the villain, if you can call her that, of the Carpenter, where she's the last one facing down bats, and instead of Needles showing him, disarming her, etc., they just show him running from room to room with her in cuffs. Simon Dark I won't spend time gushing over, but I do love it for the same for the Countdown and for Titans. Although I have a question as to whether the world in general knows Cassie is Wonder Girl or not. If not, I have a little bit of an issue with her flying away from the tower in civvies. Although, given the situation, I can understand why she did. Countdown is really cool, however, Donna Troy seems to have developed a mystical costume-switching powers, unless it happened off-panel. The other thing I have is a sort of problem with her relating to Countdown is some of the Superman Prime art in number 13 just looks a little goofy, especially during the fight with Monarch. Anyways, to wrap things up, thank you for bringing me back into comics, guys. Comic Timing got me interested enough to listen along. You guys got me interested enough to start buying them again. Your passion and enthusiasm and just all-around friendliness has drawn me to the DC Universe before even picking up an issue. I often listen to you while painting or just generally hanging around the house while not at work and really feel like I'm in the room with you guys. Thank you for many hours of enjoyment and listening, and hopefully many future ones reading and listening along to Drew. A couple of things I can clear up for you. The Countdown issue as far as the costume switching powers. She actually did switch powers with that particular character in order to pretend to be that character. If you're talking about how Wonder Girl wound up in a different Wonder Girl style costume, that was she actually switched that costume. So if you go back and read that issue again, you're going to see when that happened. And Superman Prime, if you read it again, a lot of those art changes were because he had soaked up and absorbed so much energy, and he was burning off that energy during the battle. So if you read that back again, you're going to see that that's what was going on with him. This is actually the character that was Superboy Prime, and because he got so juiced up, he actually put on a lot of bulk and was losing that energy along the way. So if you go back and read that in the storytelling, I think you'll see that's what was happening during that fight. Hopefully that clears up a little bit of that for you. As far as the Cassie's Wonder Girl issue, I've always got a big question mark on that one myself. That's a really good question, because if you think about her costume and the way that her Wonder Girl costume is designed, it actually is more of a civilian outfit than a traditional superhero costume. I actually really like her costume. I think she's just a very cool character. But she always skirts that line that you wonder how secret is her secret identity, and I'm really not 100% sure on that. I think hers is a little bit more open than, say, obviously, I mean, she doesn't wear a mask or anything like that, so there isn't a whole lot to hide who she is. So I just never got that impression that her identity was that hidden. But that's just my take on it. But anyway, thanks so much for the email, actually to both of you. I was going to go into a few more emails, but we're actually ready to wrap up at this time. And I don't like doing emails very often without Jim here, but I wanted to throw on a little bit of listener content on this episode. And that first email from Dan, Jim and I had joked about it in the beginning and, talked about Jim had some ideas on how he wanted to respond. I'm like, I'm just going to go ahead and respond to this right now, just because I just wanted to get it out there in case anyone else felt that way. I mean, Jim, I've got nothing but 110% respect for Jim, but we're going to debate things on here. We're going to disagree on things like that, and I'm very passionate about my opinions. I wouldn't do a podcast if I wasn't. Jim's very passionate about his opinions. I mean, if you go back to listen to that debate, he was coming back at me too, but I was definitely the more relentless one of the two, and I 100% admit to that. But he wanted that from me, I guarantee you. He was giggling like a little schoolgirl over here, and the sensei got what he wanted. So there you go. I want to once again give a shout out to the Eye of the Storm podcast, which you can find at eyeofthestormpodcast.blogspot.com. And if you take a look at that, episode 2 is actually up at this point, and episode 2 is going to be taking a look at Countdown Presents The Search for Ray Palmer, the Wildstorm issue. He does a forecast and some of his predictions on what's going to be happening in Wildstorm, and goes over the Wildstorm solicitations for April of 2008. So definitely take a look at that podcast. Episode 1 and episode 2 are both up at this point. So give fellow listeners some support. And remember, once again, if you're interested at all in Wildstorm, this is definitely the route to go. So definitely check out the Eye of the Storm podcast. And welcome to the podcasting community. We will be back next week with a continuation of our Countdown catch-up. Jim and I are getting closer and closer to the end. Actually, we're all getting closer and closer to the end of this controversial series. So next week we're going to be giving you our thoughts as we continue on discussing Countdown. We also, hopefully, we're keeping our fingers crossed. It depends on how we can schedule this together. But we have an opportunity to have an interview with the guys who are putting together that Tiny Titans book from Johnny D.C., and we want to chat about that book and their thoughts on it and where that series is going to head. So hopefully that'll be next week. Check out the forum and the website for more details on that. We have a great audio comment from Nightwing BK that was supposed to be a part of this show, but Jim and I did not have a chance to record our reactions to it, so we're going to save that for next week. It's on Emperor Joker. It's on the Superman Emperor Joker series from a few years back, which is traded. So if you have not had a chance to pick that one up, it's one you're definitely going to want to consider picking up. But we will be sharing our thoughts on that next week, and we're going to have some emails and some forum comments as well back with us next week. And hopefully you enjoyed this first part of Raging Oscars. We are going to be continuing this segment. We did mention early in the podcast that we're going to be back next week with it, but that's because we thought we were going to do Countdown this week. Seeing as we're not going to be able to do that next week, we're going to skip Raging Oscars just for next week. We're going to be back on the following episode, episode 62, with our thoughts on the Wildstorm universe and Vertigo. So we're going to go to that segment for our next, for episode 62 as we continue the Raging Oscars. So hopefully you enjoyed this first segment. I do encourage you to go to the forum, the episode 60 thread, and give us your own thoughts on what you would have put as your best of the best for 2007. Definitely share those thoughts down there. Hopefully that thread will be one that people can pick books from. And we're going to be back in about 10 days or so. I'm hoping to get us back somewhere in between a week to 10 days, but it'll be 10 days at the most. Just with scheduling an interview, we're basically going to be doing 2 separate recordings to put together that episode. And for Jim and I to try and schedule that in a week, it's going to be rather difficult. But we're going to try to get that interview and all that together for you for episode 61. So we'll see you in about 10 days. Check the forum and the website, though, for more information on that release. And as always, thank you for joining us.
Bye.
Jim, I'm going to pull out my notes. I've got an FTD floral statement for my wife.
Oh, that's sweet.
No, it's not. This is a great story.
Oh, okay.
I went to FTD.com, right? Now, FTD is a name that you think that you would, you naturally would associate with efficiency when it comes to floral delivery. It's what they do, right?
Oh, I can imagine where this is going.
All right, so on Tuesday, I'm at work. It's early in the morning. I want to say it's about 8 o'clock. I went onto their site, and I wanted to see, is there still time for me to order for Valentine's Day, or do I want to pick something up? I wanted to deliver to my wife's work. Usually when I get flowers from her, I've got a flower shop that's on the way home from work that is amazing. They actually cut the thorns off of the roses, and they have these wonderful roses that seem to last forever. The amount of care, you pay a premium for it, but I don't buy flowers that often. I usually buy them for special occasions. So to me, it's worth the little bit extra that they do. So I didn't want to do that this time because I'm like, I wanted to arrive at her work. So I ordered from FTD.com. Now, we've seen commercials throughout the years from FTD. It's a pretty big name. I ordered on Tuesday. Thursday morning. Now, this is Valentine's Day. It's the timestamp was 12:56 a.m., which means it came at 1 in the morning. So I'm sleeping. An email comes to me saying that the product I ordered is no longer available. How is a floral product for Valentine's Day that you order on Tuesday no longer available as of 1 in the morning on Valentine's Day? I ordered a really nice Waterford vase with a dozen roses in it. It was red and white ones. Yeah, I was really, I wanted, something special for my wife because she puts up with a lot. So I'm trying to be nice. So, okay, in the email, they give you this $20 off coupon and say you can still order today. So this is I catch this at 7 in the morning. So I go to their site. Now, their business delivery time says by 5 p.m. Okay? Their residential delivery says by 9 p.m. on the day, whatever day you have it shipped. So I'm like, okay, by 5 p.m., if it hasn't arrived by the time she's ready to leave work, I will tell her to stay till 5 p.m. Which isn't, it's about an hour, more than she would normally stay anyway. So I order this, and I ordered a different set, and she prefers pink roses anyway, so I'm like, okay, I'll go the other route now, and I'll order a dozen pink roses. Figuring that on Valentine's Day, the red ones are the ones that are going to go anyway. They don't arrive. Now, I get no phone call, nothing. I gave my work number, with the intention, if you're having a problem getting it there. I designated her work as a business, which it's her work, so it is a, business delivery. She stays till 5 o'clock, actually 5:15. She normally leaves at 5. Nothing comes. I've gotten no contact from FTD. Now, if you're a business, don't you think you should, call somebody or anything like that? Here's the great part. All day long, I'm calling them to try and, find out whether or not this order actually went through. You get through that voicemail line right to the part where they give you a busy signal every time.
Nice.
So, yeah, I'm not real big on FTD. So that's my speeding bullets for this week.
Oh, okay.
Do you got anything?
Well, you know what? I wanted to talk about Nightwing number 141.
Oh, that's a great book. Is that the one by Peter Tomasi and Rags Morales?
Yes, it is.
That's issues 140 and 141, right?
Yep.
You know what? I think I like those first two issues, too. I was going to rant about something similar till I got on the tangent about flowers.